Chapter 260. The Patriarch's Token. Yi Xian naturally knew what the Patriarch's Token represented. It represented the Patriarch of the clan. With the Patriarch's Token and the clan's history, he could do a lot of things. Yi Xian put away the Situ clan's Patriarch's Token and the clan's history, then continued to look at the next storage ring. There were no heaven-grade treasures in the second storage ring, but there were more than 1,000 purple origin crystals. Apart from that, there was also a palm-sized snow lotus. The snow lotus was sparkling and translucent, exuding a chilling aura. A heavenly treasure. There were some mystical objects in the world. These mystical objects absorbed the essence of the sun and moon and were nourished by heaven and earth. They contained great energy. The snow lotus in front of him was obviously such a mystical object. This mystical object could increase one's cultivation. If it was used by a special person, the effect would be doubled. Apart from the snow lotus, there were some miscellaneous items in the storage ring, but they were not worth much. At least, for him now, they were not worth much. In Yi Xian's eyes, ordinary items were not worth much at all. After putting away the storage ring, Yi Xian continued to move forward happily. Although he had spent nearly 2 billion supreme-grade spirit stones to activate the World Prison Pagoda this time, the harvest was not small. In short, he had made a profit. This time, Yi Xian did not travel in a blatant manner. After activating the cultivation technique escape, he hid himself. It could be said that apart from true Imperial Law Realm experts, it was difficult for ordinary people to discover him. Moreover, even true Imperial Law Realm experts would not be able to discover him unless they were looking for him deliberately. After a while, Yi Xian completely disappeared into the distance. Not long after Yi Xian left, a shadow suddenly appeared in the field. The shadow stood there in silence for a moment, then said softly, "Miss. Did you see that? Young Master has reached the Sword Emperor realm at the age of 19. Even in our Duga clan, he is outstanding. And Miss Yi Ling has stepped into the 10,000 Dharma realm before the age of 15. Moreover, her physique is special and extremely rare. If you knew this in the serene prison, you would be relieved." As his voice fell, his entire body gradually became illusory and disappeared completely in a short while. The southern Link mountain range was located in the south of Qingzhou. It was remote and sparsely populated. There were only endless mountain ranges. Yi Xian's goal this time was this vast mountain range. Dao laws. He couldn't wait to find the second Dao law now. Because he discovered that if he used the laws of Dao to power the World Prison Pagoda, the World Prison Pagoda's backlash on his body would be much smaller. One had to know that he was almost done for when he didn't have the Dao law. And just now, even though he suffered a backlash, he didn't faint. Evidently, this law of Dao was extremely important. One day later, Yi Xian arrived at the Nanlian mountain range. After entering the mountain range, Yi Xian proceeded in the direction that the guru on the second floor had told him. In the vast mountain range, Yi Xian ran all the way. Occasionally, he would encounter a few demonic beasts, but these demonic beasts did not notice him. Under the guidance of the god on the second floor, Yi Xian came to the depths of the mountain range. After about an hour, he stopped. On the ground not far in front of him, there was a huge abyss that was hundreds of feet wide and bottomless. Looking down from his position, it was pitch black and there was even a black fog lingering. It was extremely eerie. His intuition told him that this was definitely not a good place. At this moment, a voice suddenly rang in his head. "Jump! Jump!" The corner of Yi Xian's mouth twitched. He took a step forward. The abyss was pitch black and he couldn't see anything. Yi Xian was a little hesitant. His intuition told him that nothing good would happen if he jumped down. Inside the World Prison Pagoda, the second floor started to ring again. Obviously, it was rushing him. This chapter is not over, please continue to the next page. He did it. Yi Xian hesitated for a while before saying, well, let me ask you something. Since you found the Tao Law, why didn't you bring it to me? This was something that Yi Xian had been wondering about. Since the guru on the second floor dared to find trouble with the Realm Defense Alliance, there was no doubt about his strength. And since he found the Tao Law but didn't bring it back, there was definitely a problem. A huge problem. Following Yi Xian's voice, the World Prison Pagoda suddenly quieted down. But very quickly, the second floor started to shake violently. Not only the second floor, but even the first floor was shaking violently. Yi Xian instantly felt a little dizzy. He didn't feel good at all. This guy was going crazy. Yi Xian hurriedly said, Don't mess around. I won't ask anymore, okay? The World Prison Pagoda instantly quieted down. Jump. That voice rang out again. Yi Xian took another step forward. His expression gradually calmed down. As if he had thought of something, he laughed at himself. Why am I so afraid of the slightest thing? As he spoke, he leaped up and directly jumped down. Ever since the mysterious woman left, he found that he had become a little afraid of the slightest thing. In reality, when something must be done, one should do it without hesitation and not be afraid of the slightest thing. The more he thought, the more questions he had. The more questions he had, the more fearful he felt. At the bottom of the abyss, Yi Xian was falling at a high speed. He was falling very fast. Beside his ears was the cold wind. This continued for an unknown amount of time. Finally, he felt his feet touch the ground. It was pitch black underground. Luckily, he wasn't using his eyes. Otherwise, he probably wouldn't be able to see anything. At this moment, he still hadn't reached the bottom of the abyss. Now he was standing on a stone platform that extended out from the mountain wall. Below the stone platform, he still couldn't see the bottom. On the surrounding mountain walls, there were green vines as thick as an arm and weeds everywhere. There was no sound or aura. Go down. At this moment, the god on the second floor spoke again. Yi Xian nodded. He grabbed the green vine beside him and followed it down. Just like this, after descending for a full hour, he finally felt his feet touch the ground. There was water under his feet. No, Yi Xian's expression suddenly changed. It wasn't water under his feet, it was blood. Blood. In an instant, Yi Xian was on full alert. He quickly asked, God on the second floor, is there any danger? After a moment of silence, the god on the second floor suddenly said, I'm not telling you. F***ck. Yi Xian almost went berserk. Are you kidding me? At this time, he still has to be arrogant? He really couldn't beat him. Otherwise, he would really want to beat this god on the second floor. What a strange temper. He had to be cured. Unfortunately, he couldn't beat him. Yi Xian took a deep breath and extinguished the thought of beating him up. He showed a smile that he thought was very, very gentle, and used the most gentle voice he had ever used in his life. God, may I ask, is there any danger here? After a while, a voice came from the second floor, yes. Yi Xian's smile became brighter. What danger? I don't know. This time, the second floor answered very quickly. Yi Xian's smile froze. Don't know. Don't know what you're talking about. After a while, Yi Xian shook his head and continued forward. There was a lot of blood under his feet, and the smell of blood was also very strong, especially as he went forward. It was definitely not a good place. This was Yi Xian's intuition. After walking for an unknown amount of time, a blood-red flame suddenly appeared in front of him. The flame kept floating in front of him. Yi Xian felt his heart beating a little faster. Even though cultivators, if this chapter is not finished, please turn the page. Humans weren't afraid, but they were still a little fearful of the unknown. The flame was blood-red and only the size of a palm. It fluttered about, causing Yi Xian to panic. But soon, Yi Xian calmed down. He continued to move forward calmly. As he walked, he suddenly said, "Sigh, the clan is really too much. I came here to train, but they still sent more than 10 true Imperial Magic Realm experts to follow me secretly. Seriously, what's the point of training?" As he spoke, he shook his head and sighed, to think that the Yi family controls the heavenly worlds and has hundreds of true Imperial Magic Realm experts. Who would dare to bully me when I'm training outside? Seriously, why would they send people to follow me? Not far away, the ghastly flame suddenly trembled and slowly floated backwards. Yi Xian's expression was calm as he continued forwards. At the same time, his body gave off a powerful sword aura. Sword Emperor aura. It was as if he was afraid that others wouldn't know he was the Sword Emperor. Yi Xian continued, "The elder ancestor is really too much. He said that I'm only 18 years old, but he insisted that I suppress my cultivation level and my sword cultivation. If he didn't suppress it, I would have broken through the Sword Emperor and become a sword immortal long ago." As he spoke, he deeply sighed, "Forget it, suppress it then. I'll pretend to be a pig to eat a tiger when I have nothing to do." Not far away, the blood-red flame gradually retreated until it completely disappeared into the darkness. Yi Xian quickened his pace and was slightly excited. "This place is gloomy and not simple. I hope that a powerful enemy will come so that my trip won't be in vain." As he spoke, he sped up again. At this moment, the space in front of him suddenly trembled and an invisible door blocked in front of him. Space. A true Imperial Magic Realm expert. Yi Xian's heart trembled. The person who had secretly attacked was at least a true Imperial Magic Realm expert. Yi Xian glanced around and said in a cold voice, "Who are you? How dare you block my way?" At this moment, a cold voice suddenly rang out in the darkness, "Where did this brat come from? This is not a place you should be. Hurry up and scram before the old man has any killing intent." Scram? Yi Xian was stunned and then laughed crazily. "What are you laughing at?" In the darkness, the voice rang out. Yi Xian faced the distance and laughed, "In this Azure world, even the Realm Defense Alliance is just a servant of my Yi clan. You dare to ask me to scram? How arrogant of you! Do you know that with a single order from my Yi clan, not to mention this place, even the entire Azure world will be wiped out?" Yi clan? What Yi clan? I have never heard of it. The voice said again. Yi Xian snorted, "You have never heard of it, but have you heard of me, Yi Xian?" "No." In the darkness, the mysterious person replied. Yi Xian shook his head, "You have never heard of me. It seems that you are either not from this world or have stayed here for a long time. Let me tell you, I, Yi Xian, am the most outstanding swordsman in the history of Azure world. I am unprecedented and will never be surpassed." As he said this, he once again released his powerful Sword Emperor aura. The abyss suddenly became silent. After a while, the mysterious person suddenly said, "1,000 years ago, a person who called himself the Azure World Swordmaster came here. He seemed to be more monstrous than you." "Oh, damn." Yi Xian's expression froze. What the hell? He had run into a god. What should he do? How should he act? Yi Xian's brain worked quickly. Very quickly, his lips curled up and he continued forward. "Senior actually knows about the Azure World Swordmaster. It seems that Senior is not an ordinary person." As he said this, he smiled, "I have created a sword technique. Please give me some pointers." As he said this, he opened his palm and a sword appeared in his hand. In the next moment, a powerful sword aura surged out from the sword. One sword to decide life and death. This the mysterious person's voice suddenly rang out from afar. His voice was filled with shock and disbelief. End of this chapter. Chapter 261. One sword to decide life and death. Yi Xian held the sword in his hand and pointed it towards the ground. The sword in his hand contained a terrifying sword aura, like a volcano that was about to erupt. Sword aura. This sword technique, no, strictly speaking, it wasn't a sword technique, it was a belief in the way of the sword. The mysterious man was obviously someone who knew his stuff. When he saw this sword technique for the first time, he was shocked. This sword technique. Are you sure you created it? Yi Xian's expression was calm, of course. The mysterious man went silent for a moment before saying, "This sword technique is extraordinary. If it was really created by you, then the Swordmaster is far inferior to you." Yi Xian sheathed his sword and smiled, "Thank you, Senior, for your confirmation. However, compared to the Swordmaster, I am still lacking. Of course, I won't look down on myself. To me, I have just stepped onto the path of Tao Yi and I still have a long way to go." The mysterious man said, "You can't be complacent and you can't feel inferior. With such a state of mind, you will naturally be able to walk further in the way of the sword." When he said that, he paused for a moment before continuing, "I don't know how you know about this place, but this isn't a good place and it isn't suitable for training. It is best if you go somewhere else and don't make a mistake." Yi Xian smiled bitterly in his heart. Actually, he didn't want to stay here because the mysterious man in front of him wasn't an ordinary person. If he continued to stay here, who knew what would happen? However, he couldn't leave. This time, he had to obtain the Tao law. Yi Xian retracted his thoughts and smiled, "Senior, you have been here for 1,000 years? More than that." The mysterious man replied. Yi Xian was shocked. He thought about it and asked, "Why did Senior stay here for so many years?" When he said that, he continued, "Of course, if Senior is willing to stay here, then I didn't ask. If not, then maybe I can help you a little." This time, the mysterious man went silent. Yi Xian was delighted. Apparently, this mysterious man did not stay here of his own accord. Well, who would stay in such a dark place for so many years for no reason? At this moment, the mysterious man suddenly said, "There's nothing you can do about me. If you leave now, you'll be able to keep your life." Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, "Tell me about it. Perhaps I'll be able to help. If I'm really unable to help, then I'll leave and won't disturb you any longer." After a moment of silence, the mysterious man said, "Go forward." Yi Xian nodded and continued to move forward. Although his expression was incomparably calm, his heart was secretly on guard. If it wasn't for the great god from the second floor and the world prison pagoda, no matter how good the Tao laws were, he wouldn't have taken the risk. Because he knew very well that the strength of this mysterious person before him was definitely much, much stronger than him. If their strength wasn't equal, then any schemes would be useless. After walking for about 15 minutes, Yi Xian stopped. Not far in front of him was a mountain wall. Under the mountain wall, a man was sitting. The man was wearing a tattered robe. His hair was so dark that it was touching the ground. Because his hair was too long, Yi Xian couldn't see the man's face. The man just sat there, and his hands and feet weren't tied. Obviously, something was restraining him. Yi Xian stopped around 30 meters away from the man. His expression was calm, but he was secretly on guard. At this moment, the mysterious man suddenly said, "It's really rare to have such a cultivation in the sword Tao at such a young age. Unfortunately, your strength is far from enough to solve my predicament." Yi Xian said in a low voice, "I see that Senior isn't restrained by anything, but you can't move. Is there another reason?" The mysterious man suddenly raised his head, and a tiny, empty character silently condensed between his brows. Empty. With the appearance of this empty character, Yi Xian suddenly discovered that the space around him was trembling, as if it was responding to something. Dao Law. Yi Xian's heart skipped a beat. This Dao Law was actually on this mysterious man. And this Dao Law was most likely related to space. Do you know what this is? The mysterious man suddenly asked. Yi Xian shook his head. I don't know. The mysterious man said, this is a divine item. Obtaining this item will allow one to obtain divine power. Unfortunately, when I obtained this item back then, I wasn't strong enough to subdue it, so I was imprisoned here for over 1,000 years. For the past 1,000 years, I haven't been able to move an inch. Yi Xian said in a low voice, this item is actually so powerful. Senior, do you have any way to save it? The mysterious man said, yes, find a special physique and let it choose someone else. Yi Xian said softly, I believe the blood on the ground is the person that Senior is looking for, right? The mysterious man said, yes. For the past 1,000 years, I used all sorts of methods to find cultivators and made them think that there was a precious treasure here, so they came here one by one. Unfortunately, no one came. This divine item was never willing to leave me and choose someone else. At this point, he paused for a moment before he continued, until you appeared. Yi Xian's expression instantly changed when he heard this. He wanted to retreat, but a mysterious force suddenly enveloped him. The mysterious man smiled and said, do you know how happy I was when you appeared in this abyss? Because this divine item actually reacted when you appeared. It was the first time in 1,000 years that it reacted to a human. At this point, his voice carried a trace of excitement that was difficult to conceal. Yi Xian said in a low voice, but why did you keep asking me to leave just now? The mysterious man chuckled, if I asked you to come here, you would definitely be suspicious and leave instead. But if I asked you to leave, it's very likely that you would come here. Psychological warfare. Yi Xian held the sword in his hand tightly, and it was trembling. Meanwhile, the mysterious man suddenly said, you're really not simple for your attainments in the sword Dao to reach such a level at such a young age. Unfortunately, you're really too weak in my opinion. You're so weak that you can't even withstand a single blow. So, don't waste your energy. Yi Xian said in a low voice, Senior, aren't you afraid of my Yi clan? The mysterious man smiled, perhaps you do have an extraordinary power behind you, but so what? Even if you face endless trouble outside, it's better than dying here. What do you think? Yi Xian shook his head, I admit defeat. The mysterious man said, I wasn't a heinous person in the past. Unfortunately, after being imprisoned for over 1,000 years, good people and bad people are meaningless to me. Freedom, I just want freedom. As soon as he finished speaking, Yi Xian instantly felt a mysterious force pulling him towards the mysterious man. He couldn't resist it. It was useless even if he executed 2 types of sword intents. The gap between them was too big. The man in front of him was so strong that even the second-floor great god couldn't fight against him. Otherwise, the second-floor great god wouldn't have asked him to come instead of taking the Dao Law away. The problem was that if the second-floor great god couldn't defeat him, would he be able to defeat him by asking him to come? Asking him to come was equivalent to asking him to die. He didn't know what the second-floor great god was thinking. The closer Yi Xian got to the mysterious man, the more the Dao Law between the mysterious man's eyebrows became. When he was less than 5 feet away from the mysterious man, the Dao Law between the mysterious man's eyebrows was already as bright as the sun. At this moment, the mysterious man's body actually began to tremble. At this moment, the mysterious man was extremely excited because he could feel that the divine object between his eyebrows was showing signs of leaving. As for Yi Xian, his expression was ferocious. His face was filled with unwillingness and anger. In fact, he was very calm inside. If it was something else, he would definitely be afraid. However, he really wasn't afraid of the Tao law. This was because he had a tower. Soon, he was getting closer and closer to the mysterious man. When the two of them were very close, the mysterious man suddenly roared. In an instant, the Kong character between his eyebrows suddenly flew out and directly sank into the space between Yi Xian's eyebrows. Yi Xian's body trembled violently as if he had suffered a heavy blow. Meanwhile, the mysterious man was like a deflated balloon as he went limp. However, Yi Xian was frozen on the spot as if his body was frozen. After a while, the mysterious man suddenly burst into laughter. His laughter grew louder and louder until it filled the entire underground abyss. Just like that, the mysterious man only stopped after laughing for about half an hour. Then, he looked at Yi Xian in front of him. Back then, I chased after this thing for a full 10 years. Unfortunately, I didn't expect to be imprisoned by it. If it wasn't for this thing, I'm afraid I would have entered the Supreme Realm long ago. Yi Xian clenched his fists tightly. Senior, are you trying to kill me? If that's the case, that's fine too. It saves me a lot of pain. The mysterious man shook his head. How can I kill you? If I kill you and it comes looking for me again, won't I be imprisoned again? Moreover, I've stayed in this sunless place for over 1,000 years. Do you know how I've passed these 1,000 years? At this point, his expression was quite ferocious. 1,000 years, a whole 1,000 years. If I could commit suicide, would have done so long ago. But now, I hope someone can come and feel the loneliness and pain I've experienced for the past 1,000 years. After saying that, he lightly patted Yi Xian's shoulder and smiled. With your cultivation, living for 100 years won't be a problem. After 100 years, I'll come and see you, haha. After saying that, he turned around and left. As if he had thought of something, the mysterious man suddenly stopped. I'm happy today. Do you have any last words? If you do, I don't mind saying a few words for you. After a moment of silence, Yi Xian said, help me pass a message to the Realm Defense Alliance's Supreme Lord Lu. Say, I'm your father. The mysterious man was stunned. Are you sure? Yi Xian said indifferently, I'm sure. However, the Realm Defense Alliance's Supreme Lord Lu is an expert above the true defense law realm. Although you're not weak, compared to him, I'm afraid you're much weaker. So, it's better not to go. The mysterious man shook his head and chuckled. Cheap provocation. Don't worry, I'll go. As for what you said about the opponent being not weak, that's because you don't know anything about my strength. Enjoy the rest of your life. After 100 years, this emperor will come and see you. After saying that, he soared into the sky. After a while, loud laughter came from outside the abyss. At the bottom of the abyss, Yi Xian shook his head. Too handsome. Can't help it. I'm always blessed by the heavens. After saying that, he walked to the side and began to laugh crazily until his stomach hurt. P.S. I have a friend. He likes a woman. Yesterday, the woman asked him to accompany her to the hospital to have an abortion. The child is not his. My friend actually went. Sigh, the most complicated thing in the world is love. One of my insights is that you can love, but you can't love in a humble way. Whether it's a man or a woman, if your love is too humble, the other party will only look down on you or not cherish you. I suggest that you stop dating and read more books. If you want to read books, you should vote for The Only Sword. Chapter 262. Tao Law. Although Yi Xian knew nothing about the origin of the prison pagoda, he still knew a little about it. There were a total of 9 Tao laws in the prison pagoda. The prison pagoda had obviously been severely damaged and the 9 Tao laws had been scattered. In other words, the 9 Tao laws had originally been in the prison pagoda. Without the prison pagoda, he might have ended up like the mysterious man and been imprisoned in the prison pagoda. However, with the prison pagoda, the Tao Law entering his body was equivalent to returning to its original owner. Problem? There shouldn't be any problem. No. There was a problem. Yi Xian seemed to have thought of something and suddenly came to his senses. He hurriedly entered the prison pagoda. At that moment, the second level of the prison pagoda began to shake. The first Tao Law was on the first level, which was also a seal on the first level. The second Tao Law was naturally on the second level. In other words, after the Tao Law entered the second level, the Almighty on the second floor would most likely be able to come out. Come out. Yi Xian gulped. He was still a little flustered. Although the Almighty on the second floor wasn't that bad, he wasn't that reliable either. If he left after coming out, it wouldn't be a big deal. However, if he didn't leave after coming out and wanted to seize the pagoda, it would be troublesome. The second floor was extremely quiet and there was no movement. The more it was like this, the more flustered Yi Xian became. At that moment, he tried to sense the space Tao Law. Very soon, he sensed it. After sensing it, he realized that he could actually sense the existence of the second level. He could enter the second level. No. This wasn't the second level. Yi Xian's expression suddenly changed. He was completely dumbfounded. This was the third level. The third level. At that moment, the second floor suddenly shook as if there was an earthquake. Obviously, the Almighty on the second floor also realized it. The entire second floor was shaking crazily. Obviously, the Almighty on the second floor was extremely furious. Yi Xian was afraid that the Almighty on the second floor would take things too hard, so he hurriedly said, Don't be angry. When the time comes, I'll find the Tao Law of the second level and let you out, okay? It was useless. The Almighty on the second floor was still tormenting him with all his might. This torment made Yi Xian very uncomfortable. Even though it wasn't fatal to him, the world prison pagoda was connected to his mind. With the great god on the second floor causing such a ruckus, he definitely didn't feel good. Just like that, this went on for about half an hour before the god on the second floor stopped for a while. Yi Xian smiled bitterly. He could understand why the gods on the second floor were like that. After all, they had been locked up in the pagoda for so many years, and now they finally had a chance to get out. However, it discovered that the Tao laws were wrong, not on its level. If it was anyone else, they would definitely go mad. At this time, a shadow appeared in front of Yi Xian. It was the second floor god. At this moment, he was staring at Yi Xian with an unfriendly gaze. Yi Xian said seriously, Actually, we should live in peace. What do you think? The Almighty on the second floor didn't say anything. Yi Xian thought about it and said, How about this? I'll find the second Tao law within a year, and then I'll let you go. However, if I'm in trouble during this period, you have to help me to the best of your ability. How about that? The second floor god stared at Yi Xian for a long time. Finally, he suddenly said, You're thick-skinned, and you like to fool people. Yi Xian was speechless. The second floor god had been in the pagoda for so long that he had some understanding of Yi Xian's personality. When he was so shameless, even the world prison pagoda might not be able to break it. At this time, Yi Xian said in a low voice, Have you ever seen me fool my own people? I, Yi Xian, promise to find the second Tao law as soon as possible. When that time comes, I'll set you free. However, during this period, I hope you can help me at a critical moment. How about that? The second floor god stared at Yi Xian for a long time. Finally, he turned and disappeared. Obviously, he had agreed to it. Yi Xian also felt relieved. Naturally, he did not want anything unpleasant to happen between him and the god on the second floor. It would be best if everyone cooperated and helped each other. The third level. After Yi Xian convinced the second-floor god, he immediately focused his attention on the Tao Law. At this moment, he could already enter the third level through the second Tao Law. Until now, there was no movement on the third level at all. Should he go in? Yi Xian was a little hesitant. If he went in and got killed, it would be such an unjust death. However, he was a little unwilling not to go in. After hesitating for a long time, Yi Xian finally chose to go in. If he didn't go in, it felt like something was tickling him, making his heart itch. Soon, Yi Xian entered the third level of the World Prison Pagoda through the Spatial Tao Law. The third level was very empty, without any items. Not far in front of Yi Xian, there was a wisp of white qi floating in the air. This wisp of qi was about the length of 2 fingers, and it floated quietly in the air. Apart from this wisp of qi, there was nothing in the entire third level. Qi? Yi Xian frowned. What kind of qi is this? He walked in front of the wisp of qi, but it was extremely calm and had no reaction. At this moment, the wisp of qi suddenly trembled, but in the next moment, the spatial Tao Law suddenly appeared above its head. In an instant, the wisp of white qi calmed down. Obviously, it was suppressed by the spatial Tao Law. Yi Xian thought about it and said, "I'll let you out, but you have to be obedient, all right?" The wisp of qi had no reaction. Yi Xian was a little helpless and was about to turn and leave. He naturally did not dare to release this wisp of qi without permission. Because it was definitely not simple to be locked in here. Moreover, this wisp of qi was locked in the third level, which was a level higher than the second-floor god. Right at this moment, the wisp of qi suddenly trembled once more. Yi Xian stopped moving. Under his control, the Tao laws suddenly left. Meanwhile, the wisp of qi floated directly in front of him and seemed to be sizing him up. A short moment later, it suddenly transformed into a ray of white light that shot into the space between Yi Xian's brows. In an instant, Yi Xian's mind went blank. It didn't take long for a scene to appear in the depths of his mind. It was an expanse of pitch-black chaos. There was nothing in the surroundings, and it was pitch black. Suddenly, this expanse of chaos exploded, and everything in the surroundings started to undergo a qualitative change. Just like that, this continued for an unknown period of time until the surroundings transformed into a starry sky, and there was a wisp of qi floating in this starry sky. A wisp of white qi. But right at this moment, a black pagoda that was almost 30 kilometers tall suddenly appeared in this starry sky. A moment later, the wisp of white qi was absorbed into the pagoda, and the pagoda transformed into a ray of black light that vanished into the depths of the boundless starry sky. The scene stopped abruptly. Within the pagoda, Yi Xian returned to his senses. At this moment, his heart was roiling like waves. The prison pagoda. The last pagoda that appeared in his mind was the prison pagoda. And this wisp of qi was called primal chaos qi. It was born during the primal chaos of the universe, and it was born together with the universe. As for it, it was rather tragic. The moment it was born, it was directly taken away by the prison pagoda. Not long after it entered the prison pagoda was heavily damaged, and then it was forcefully sealed. Thus, it did not have the chance to grow on its own. Right now, it was equivalent to a 3-year-old child. As for its use, Yi Xian did not know what it was used for. However, after this wisp of qi entered his body, he found that it was very comfortable. Moreover, this wisp of qi would constantly circulate in his body. As this wisp of qi circulated, he found that his entire body was extremely comfortable, as if the impurities in his body had been expelled. It was incomparably comfortable. Marrow cleansing? Yi Xian knew that the human body actually contained many impurities. After all, humans ate grains. In this world, there were some heavenly treasures that could cleanse one's marrow. In other words, they could absorb the impurities in the human body, allowing a person's physique to achieve a qualitative transformation. However, these heavenly treasures were extremely difficult to obtain, and only a few top forces could possibly have them. And now, this wisp of primal chaos chi in his body clearly had such an effect. Although this wisp of chi could not increase his combat power, it was more useful than increasing his combat power. Good stuff. Yi Xian grinned. As if he had thought of something, he sensed the wisp of chi. In the next moment, he was stunned on the spot. This was because at this moment, he could not sense his own existence. He found that not only was his aura gone, he could not even sense himself, as if he did not exist. However, the problem was that he was here. He had jumped out of space and was not within the 5 elements. He had only experienced this situation from one person before, and that was the mysterious woman. Yi Xian was completely stunned on the spot. Chapter 263. Aura Concealment? Escape from space? What was the use of that? Yi Xian was stunned for a long time before he suddenly slapped his thigh. Damn it, it's very useful. Aura Concealment. This aura concealment was completely different from his escape technique. In fact, it was on a completely different level. Now that he was using the chaotic chi, he could conceal himself perfectly. Even if he stood in front of a true defensive spell realm expert, the other party would not be able to sense him. Just like the mysterious woman. Apart from that, it had another use, and that was for escaping. With the chaotic chi, as long as he hid, who would be able to find him? Moreover, the chaotic chi definitely had other uses. It was just that he had yet to discover them. However, he was not in a hurry. After all, the chaotic chi would not run away. Yi Xian left the prison pagoda. At this moment, a tiny space word appeared between his brows. Space Dao Law. The moment this Dao Law appeared, Yi Xian was shocked to discover that the originally illusory space had actually solidified. At this moment, he could actually clearly sense everything in the space around him. How space was formed was made up of matter, and there were many types of matter. However, this was too complicated and he did not understand it well. However, he realized that through this Space Dao Law, his understanding of space had instantly increased to a level that only a true defensive spell realm expert should understand. The reason why true defensive spell realm experts were so powerful was because they could control space and use it to break down the energy that existed in space. Be it sword techniques or mystiques, they were all formed by energy. The terrifying thing about true defensive spell realm experts was that they could directly break down this energy. This was why there was such a huge difference between the true defensive spell realm and the true defensive spell realm. To put it simply, true defensive spell realm experts could not only use space, but they could also break down space. Now that he had this Dao Law, he could easily do this. Dao Law. At this moment, Yi Xian finally realized how terrifying this Dao Law was. Moreover, his intuition told him that this Space Dao Law was far more than this. This required him to slowly study and develop. Yi Xian took a deep breath. Then he waved his right hand forward slightly. In an instant, the space in front of him started to ripple like water. After that, he twisted his right hand lightly, and a strange vortex instantly formed in the space before him. As if he had thought of something, the sword in his left hand suddenly flew out and stabbed towards himself. Just as the sword was half an inch away from his forehead, the spatial Dao Law between his brows suddenly trembled. In the next moment, the sword seemed to be blocked by an invisible barrier, and it could not advance any further. At the same time, the sword started to tremble violently, and the sword light on the sword started to disappear bit by bit. Decompose. Not long after, the sword light around the sword completely disappeared, and the sword began to tremble violently, as if it was about to disintegrate. Yi Xian stopped. He held his sword and said softly, what a terrifying Tao law! A true defensive magic realm expert would not be able to decompose a heaven-grade treasure, but the space Tao law could. If he continued, he would definitely be able to decompose this heaven-grade sword. Of course, it would take a lot of time, and when he was fighting an enemy, no one would give him a chance to decompose it. Unless he could decompose a heaven-grade treasure in an instant, it would not be very practical. However, although he could not decompose a heaven-grade treasure in an instant, he could easily do it for anything below the heaven grade. Right now, he was at the Dharma realm, but he could use the space Tao law to reach the true defensive magic realm. Of course, this was not the true defense realm. Although he could also decompose, the strength of a true defense realm expert was not only in using space to decompose, but also in battle awareness, experience, and the use of mystic arts and mystic skills. These were not to be ignored. Therefore, Yi Xian knew very well that he was not at the true defensive magic realm. Moreover, although he could use space to decompose, he still needed to rely on the Tao law. Moreover, this Tao law was not condensed by him. Strictly speaking, it was an external object, and not his own strength. Although he had a treasure, he could not rely on it too much or treat it as capital. Yi Xian did not continue his research. Instead, he left the abyss and went to a dense forest in the depths of the Nanlian Mountains. He was afraid that the mysterious person from before would return. Although he now had the space Tao law, there was still a huge gap between him and the mysterious person. In the dense forest, Yi Xian continued his research. What he wanted to do was to develop this space Tao law. It would be best if he could use it to create some special moves that belonged to him. Because he had thought of something, and now, he wanted to try to see if it could work. While Yi Xian was studying the space Tao law, a middle-aged man arrived at the World Protection Mountain of the Central Plains. The middle-aged man had just stepped into the World Protection Mountain when several powerful auras locked onto him. The middle-aged man was expressionless. With a wave of his hand, the auras instantly disappeared without a trace. "How dare you!" At this moment, an angry shout suddenly rang out from the top of the World Protection Mountain. Then, an old man appeared in front of the middle-aged man. A true defensive magic realm expert. The old man stared coldly at the middle-aged man. "Who are you? How dare you trespass on my World Protection Mountain? Aren't you afraid of having your entire clan executed? Who are you?" The middle-aged man was taken aback. Gradually, his eyes became somewhat dazed. After a long while, his eyes gradually began to clear up. "Lian Yuan. I'm Lian Yuan, Great Emperor Lian Yuan, Great Emperor Lian Yuan." The old man frowned. "What's that? This old man has never heard of it." The middle-aged man called Lian Yuan suddenly waved his right hand. Bang! Without any warning, the old man was instantly sent flying hundreds of meters away. Hundreds of meters away, the old man looked at Lian Yuan in shock. Lian Yuan was expressionless. "Is Supremacy Lu of the Realm Protection Alliance here?" At this moment, a middle-aged man suddenly appeared in front of Lian Yuan. This person was Supremacy Lu of the Realm Protection Alliance. Supremacy Lu stared at Lian Yuan. "Who are you?" Lian Yuan shook his head. "I won't say much about who I am. I've come to bring a message to someone." "Who?" Supremacy Lu asked. Lian Yuan said, "Yi Xian." "Yi Xian." Hearing this, Supremacy Lu's eyes suddenly narrowed. A cold light flickered in his eyes. "What message?" Lian Yuan said indifferently. "He said he's your father." "Impudent." Supremacy Lu was furious. A monstrous pressure directly crushed towards Lian Yuan. In an instant, the entire sky trembled violently. Facing this terrifying pressure, Lian Yuan's expression did not change. He gently waved his right hand. A silver light vibrated out. In an instant, the pressure disappeared without a trace. At this moment, Supremacy Lu's expression became solemn. The person in front of him was not an ordinary person. Supremacy Lu stared at Lien Yuan. "Who are you?" Lien Yuan shook his head. "I've brought the message. The matter is done. Farewell." With that, he was about to leave. At this moment, Supremacy Lu suddenly appeared in front of Lien Yuan. Lien Yuan said indifferently, "Although your strength is not bad, it's impossible for you to stop me." Supremacy Lu said in a low voice. "You and that Yi Xian." Lien Yuan shook his head. "There's nothing between us. I just came to bring a message. He said he's your father. That's all." With that, he did not wait for Supremacy Lu's reply and directly disappeared into the horizon. Supremacy Lu's face was livid. He had never been humiliated like this before. Gradually, Supremacy Lu's expression calmed down. He turned his head and looked into the distance. "Do you know where Yi Xian is?" In the distance, a man in black suddenly appeared. The man in black bowed slightly. "I don't know where he went after leaving the country of Jiang," Supremacy Lu said calmly. "Find out where he is. But don't act rashly. Also, does he have a sister?" The man in black nodded. "Her name is Yi Ling. She is now the Holy Virgin of the Northern Chill sect. She is extremely talented. At such a young age, she has already reached the Dharma realm. If she continues to grow, I'm afraid she will be even more talented than Yi Xian." After a moment of silence, Supremacy Lu asked, "How is the relationship between the brother and sister?" "Excellent." The man in black said, "The brother and sister have depended on each other since they were young. They are very close. Yi Ling is Yi Xian's reverse scale. For Yi Ling, Yi Xian did not hesitate to risk his life against Kuraki Academy." Supremacy Lu said softly, "If we control Yi Ling, it is equivalent to controlling Yi Xian." The man in black said in a low voice, "Supremacy, Yi Ling is the Holy Virgin of the Northern Chill sect. The Northern Chill sect will definitely not hand her over to the Realm Defense Alliance. Although the Northern Chill sect is not as strong as the Realm Defense Alliance, it is not good for us to make enemies with the Northern Chill sect at this time. At least, before Supremacy Lu completes his mission, it is better not to make enemies with the Northern Chill sect." Supremacy Lu said indifferently, "Why do we have to make enemies with the Northern Chill sect?" "Then what do you mean, Supremacy Lu?" the man in black asked. Supremacy Lu chuckled. "I have a nephew. Although he is a bit of a playboy, he is also a talented man. It is not a bad deal to marry the Holy Virgin of the Northern Chill sect." The man in black hesitated and then said, "What if the Northern Chill sect does not agree?" Supremacy Lu said indifferently, "We are not asking for Yi Ling's life. If the Northern Chill sect still does not agree, then they are not sensible. At that time, we will send someone to suppress them and they will know what is good for them. I do not believe that the Northern Chill sect would dare to go against the Realm Defense Alliance. Tomorrow, bring some gifts to the Northern Chill sect to propose marriage. Let us see what their attitude is." After that, he turned around and left. And the man in black also left quietly. In the Nanlian Mountains, Yi Xian was still studying the Space Dao Law that he had just obtained. The use of space. In the dense forest, Yi Xian stood in front of a tree, carrying a sword case on his back. Suddenly, a sword flew out of the sheath and slashed at an ancient tree 10 feet away. When the sword was 5 feet away from the ancient tree, Yi Xian suddenly grabbed the air with his right hand. Cage. The Space Dao Law between his eyebrows trembled slightly. The next moment, his flying sword stopped in the air. No matter how hard he tried, the sword could not move at all. Space Cage. Chapter 264. Spatial cage. What was a spatial cage? Naturally, it was the use of space to form a separate cage to imprison the opponent. The reason he had this idea was because of the mysterious man at the bottom of the abyss. That mysterious man was so powerful, but he had been imprisoned by the Tao law for more than 1,000 years. Obviously, the spatial power of the Tao law of space was extremely terrifying. Although he couldn't unleash the full power of the Tao law of space, he could still make good use of this special spatial power. Spatial cage. It was a martial technique, no, a divine ability, formed with the Tao law of space as a medium. According to his estimation, this divine ability might not be very effective against true defense realm experts, but it definitely wouldn't be completely useless. The strength of true defense realm experts was that they could use the power of space to disintegrate. What if he used this spatial cage to protect his sword chi when he used his sword skills in the future? In this way, he would once again narrow the gap between him and a true defense realm expert. Recollecting his thoughts, Yi Xian continued cultivating. What he needed to do now was to cultivate this spatial cage to the extreme. Apart from that, he had one more thing to do: condense the Tao law into a sword. He hadn't forgotten about this. Since the mysterious woman had asked him to do this, she must have had her reasons. However, he had to do one thing at a time. Now that he wasn't the dean of Blue Waves Academy, he didn't have much to do. Without any burden or pressure, he could focus on his cultivation. Temporarily disbanding Blue Waves Academy was actually a good thing for him. While Yi Xian was concentrating on his cultivation, Azure Province was undergoing tremendous changes. At least 80% of Azure Province had fallen. This was especially true for the Devil Sect and the Ghost Sect. After the two sects took over the Azure Province, they occupied a large area, and the cultivators of the two sects could be said to be unbridled. In addition to the Ghost Sect and Devil Sect, the native cultivators of Azure Province were also in chaos. Some of them didn't dare bully the cultivators from the Divine Central Continent, but they dared to bully the native cultivators of Azure Province because they were weaker than them. The entire Azure Province was in utter chaos. The only countries that weren't in chaos were the Ning Kingdom and the Great Cloud Empire, because even the Devil Sect and Ghost Sect strictly forbade their disciples from invading these two countries. The reason, of course, was because of Yi Xian. This person who had already disappeared from the Qingzhou. Although Yi Xian hadn't appeared in Azure Province, his legend still circulated throughout the province. Especially those cultivators from the Divine Central Continent. They were extremely afraid of Yi Xian. Or rather, they were afraid of him. It should be noted that Yi Xian had slaughtered countless cultivators of the Divine Central Continent. Wherever Yi Xian was, it was absolutely a forbidden place. Although Yi Xian was not here, the cultivators of the Divine Central Continent still did not have the nerve to offend the forces related to him. Not to mention the Ning Kingdom and the Great Cloud Empire, not a single cultivator of the Central Divine region dared to step into the Green City of the Jiang Kingdom. At least, before Yi Xian died, these cultivators from the Divine Central Continent would not provoke anyone related to Yi Xian. Countless native cultivators of Azure Province were regretting their decision. It was only now that many of them realized that the cultivators from the Divine Central Continent hadn't come to Azure Province for Yi Xian. Unfortunately, it was too late. Without Yi Xian, Azure Province was even more chaotic. Therefore, some people began to look for Yi Xian everywhere, hoping that Yi Xian would continue to hold the fort for them. After Azure Waves Academy was disbanded, it completely disappeared, breaking up into smaller groups and developing on its own. These people were hiding in the crowd. They were quietly cultivating and waiting. They were waiting for the day Yi Xian would summon them. The Great Cloud Empire. Lian Wanli stood quietly on the city walls of the imperial capital. She looked ahead with her hands clasped behind her back, lost in thought. Her arm had obviously recovered. Behind Lian Wanli was the female guard, Azwa. After an unknown period of time, Lien Wanli asked softly, Azure Province has completely fallen, right? Ozwa nodded slightly. Sort of. What about him? Lien Wanli asked suddenly. Ozwa clearly knew who Lien Wanli was referring to. She immediately said, he vanished without a trace after leaving the Jiang nation. There's no news of him at all. Lien Wanli nodded slightly. Keep an eye on him. Inform me directly if there's any news of him. Ozwa hesitated for a moment before she said, My king, although he's strong, he's too petty. Now that he's gone, Azure Province is, what can he do if he doesn't leave? Lien Wanli suddenly asked. If he doesn't leave, he won't just have to face the cultivators of the divine central continent, but also the native cultivators of Azure Province. He's done enough for this land. It should be everyone's responsibility to protect this land, not just one person. Ozwa nodded slightly. I understand. But my king, if I may be so bold as to ask, why are you looking for him? Lien Wanli glanced at his arm and smirked, let him see this king's arm. Ozwa was speechless. The divine central continent. The frigid North sect. On this day, an old man came to the frigid North sect. He hadn't come empty-handed. Instead, he'd brought many gifts. A marriage proposal. The old man sat quietly in the frigid North Hall. Not far from him sat a beautiful woman in a white dress. This beautiful woman was the sect master of the frigid North sect, Shen Weiyang. The old man stood up and cupped his fists. Sect Master Shen, this old man has come on behalf of the Realm Defense Alliance. To tell you the truth, the Realm Defense Alliance wishes to become in-laws with the frigid North sect. In-laws. Shen Weiyang's brows furrowed slightly. In-laws? The old man smiled. Exactly. I've long heard that the holy maiden of your sect is a genius who has reached the true 10,000 Dharma realm at such a young age. Such a genius naturally needs to be betrothed to a good husband. To tell you the truth, Supremacy Lu of the Realm Defense Alliance has a nephew called Lu Xianming. Xianming has admired the holy maiden Yi Ling for a long time. I hope Sect Master Shen can grant his wish. Lu Xianming. Shen Weiyang's expression turned ugly. Who didn't know that Lu Xianming of the Realm Defense Alliance was a playboy? Shen Weiyang didn't get angry. She raised her teacup and took a sip. Then she smiled. Thank you, Lord Lu, for thinking so highly of me. However, Xiao Ling isn't even 15 yet. She is still too young to be betrothed. Please understand. Hearing this, the smile on the old man's face disappeared without a trace. Shen Weiyang didn't say anything. Yi Ling was the future hope of the frigid North sect. Naturally, she wouldn't hand her over so easily. Even if she agreed, the elders of the sect wouldn't. Because Yi Ling was the next sect master of the frigid North sect. The old man glanced at Shen Weiyang and said indifferently, why? Does the frigid North sect look down on the Realm Defense Alliance? Obviously, he wanted to use his power to suppress them. Shen Weiyang smiled. What are you talking about? In the firmament world, who would dare to look down on the Realm Defense Alliance? As I said, Xiao Ling is only 14. It's really not suitable for her to be betrothed at this age. Let's wait until she's 18 before we talk about marriage. What do you think? Delay. How could the old man not know that Shen Weiyang was trying to delay? He sneered. 14 years old. That's not young. Sect Master Shen, it's not a bad thing for the frigid North sect to be betrothed to the Realm Defense Alliance. Especially now that the spiritual qi in the firmament world is thin. The spiritual qi everywhere is slowly disappearing. Then he smiled. According to what the old man knows, the spiritual qi in the frigid North sect is slowly disappearing. Also, the ice in many places is slowly melting. Sect Master Shen, the frigid North sect doesn't seem to be doing well. If something happens to the frigid North sect at this time, it won't be good. Hearing this, Shen Weiyang's expression turned cold. A threat. The old man's words were a blatant threat. The old man ignored Shen Weiyang's cold expression. He stood up and smiled. Sect Master Shen, the Realm Defense Alliance has no ill intentions towards the frigid North sect. We just want to be betrothed to the frigid North sect. Lord Lu has promised that as long as the frigid North sect is betrothed to the Realm Defense Alliance, the frigid North sect's business will be the Realm Defense Alliance's business. Not only that, Lady Yiling can still inherit the frigid North sect, and the Realm Defense Alliance will not interfere with the frigid North sect's internal affairs. Then he cupped his fists. In 3 days, the Realm Defense Alliance will come to fetch the bride. Please be prepared, Sect Master Shen. Then, he turned around and left. Inside the hall, a powerful aura suddenly swept out from Shen Weiyang's body. The ice table in front of her instantly turned into powder. Shen Weiyang's expression was cold and her eyes were filled with murderous intent. The Realm Defense Alliance has gone too far. Just then, an old woman walked out. She was the Granny Leng who had been following Yiling. Granny Leng said in a low voice, "I'm afraid the Realm Defense Alliance is doing this because of Yi Xian." Yi Xian. Shen Weiyang looked at Granny Leng. Where is he now? Granny Leng shook her head. Ever since he left the country of Jiang, he has completely disappeared. We don't know where he is now. Shen Weiyang said after a moment of silence, the Realm Defense Alliance doesn't dare to kill him openly because they're afraid of something. I heard that there's a sword immortal behind him. Tell this to the Azure Province later. Make sure that he comes to the Divine Central Continent. Granny Leng said in a low voice, even if he comes, I'm afraid he won't be able to change the Realm Defense Alliance's decision. Shen Weiyang said coldly, the Realm Defense Alliance's target isn't Xiaoling, but Yi Xian. As long as he comes, he can successfully attract the Realm Defense Alliance's attention. The Realm Defense Alliance will only let Xiaoling go if he dies. Granny Leng was a little hesitant. Xiaoling has deep feelings for Yi Xian. If she finds out that we're scheming against Yi Xian, she'll probably hate us and the frigid North sect to death. Shen Weiyang shook her head. She'll understand us in the future. Just do it. Granny Leng sighed softly and turned to leave. Soon, the news that the Realm Defense Alliance wanted to marry Xiaoling spread to the Azure Province. Azure Province, Nanlian Mountain Range. Yi Xian, who was cultivating, suddenly stopped and took out a voice transmission stone. A moment later, he flew into a rage and slashed down with his sword. Boom! The trees within dozens of feet of him were instantly turned to dust. Yi Xian sheathed his sword with a ferocious expression. Marry my sister? Have you asked me? A bunch of scum. After saying that, he turned around and left with his sword. P.S. Men can't be too honest. If they're too honest, they'll be easily bullied. My friend's love is too humble. Sigh, if he was even 1/10 as handsome as I am, he wouldn't have had so many girlfriends. It's not an exaggeration to say that the number of people who come to my house for blind dates every holiday is enough to flatten my doorstep. Believe me, I'm willing to swear in the name of millions of readers. If I'm lying, everyone's dicks will be shortened by 10 centimeters. Chapter 265. Anger. Yi Xian was naturally furious. He did not expect that the Realm Defense Alliance would not dare to kill him openly, but instead set their sights on his sister. Yi Ling. Whoever dared to set their sights on Yi Ling, Yi Xian, would be absolutely irreconcilable with that person. To the Divine Central Continent. Yi Xian did not hesitate at all. However, before going, he had to do one or two things first. Ning Kingdom. After Yi Xian arrived in Ning Kingdom, in order not to attract attention, he quietly sneaked into Tuoba Yan's palace. As soon as he entered the palace, Yi Xian was stunned. Inside the palace, Tuoba Yan and Ji Anji were sitting in a huge wooden tub bathing. In an instant, many images appeared in Yi Xian's mind. At this moment, he was in a dilemma. Look? Or not look? Without being in a dilemma for long, Yi Xian shook his head and prepared to leave. Men could be dissolute, but they could not be obscene. Moreover, sneaking around like this was a form of disrespect to the two women. Even if he wanted to look, he had to do it openly. How could he sneak around? Yi Xian was not that kind of person. Yi Xian quietly retreated, but the next moment, he suddenly revealed his true form, pushed open the door, and said loudly, "Long time no see." Hearing Yi Xian's voice, Ji Anji and Tuoba Yan, who were in the tub, were stunned. Yi Xian was also dumbfounded at this moment. The three of them were dumbfounded, but Tuoba Yan and Ji Anji just happened to get up, so their beautiful bodies were unreservedly presented in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian was the first to recover, and he hurriedly turned around. "I didn't see anything, really." Tuoba Yan's beautiful eyes were filled with anger. "Get out!" Yi Xian hurriedly walked out of the hall, and at this time, two female guards appeared in front of him. Obviously, they were alerted by Yi Xian. The two female guards were about to make a move, but when they saw that it was Yi Xian, they were stunned for a moment before hurriedly bowing. Obviously, he knew Yi Xian. Yi Xian smiled sheepishly. "It's a misunderstanding. You can leave now." The two female guards looked at each other. After a moment of hesitation, they quietly retreated. After the two of them left, Yi Xian sat on the ground. His heart was thumping wildly. It was a little exciting. 15 minutes later, in Tuoba Yan's chamber, Tuoba Yan and Ji Anji sat on the bed while Yi Xian sat on a chair by the side. The two women didn't say anything and just stared at Yi Xian. Yi Xian felt his scalp go numb. After a moment, Yi Xian was the first to break the deadlock. He smiled bitterly. "I actually didn't see anything. You know, I don't have eyes." Tuoba Yan glared at Yi Xian. "Don't talk nonsense. Tell me, what are you here for?" Yi Xian nodded and said seriously, "I want to go to the Divine Central Continent." "The Divine Central Continent?" Tuoba Yan frowned slightly. "What's wrong?" Yi Xian told them about the Realm Defense Alliance's attempt to force Yi Ling into marriage. Inside the hall, the two women were silent. After a moment, Tuoba Yan said solemnly, "This matter isn't that simple." Yi Xian nodded. "I know. I came this time because I'm a little worried about the two of you." Hearing Yi Xian's words, the two women glanced at him, and the anger in Tuoba Yan's eyes faded slightly. At this moment, Yi Xian took out a spatial ring and handed it to Tuoba Yan. "There are 300 million supreme-grade spirit stones in this spatial ring. 100 million of them are for the two of you to cultivate, and the remaining 200 million are for activating the 12 metal colossi. As long as the Devil Sect and Ghost Sect don't act against the Ning Kingdom. These 12 metal colossi are enough to deal with the cultivators of the Divine Central Continent. As for the Devil Sect and Ghost Sect, I'll personally go there." Tuoba Yan frowned again. "You're going to the Devil Sect?" Yi Xian smiled. "Don't worry, I'm confident." Tuoba Yan hesitated for a moment and then asked, "Will you come back after this?" Yi Xian shook his head. The two women were stunned. At this moment, Yi Xian asked with a smile, "Do you want me to come back?" "Yes." Ji Anji said suddenly. Tuoba Yan said coldly, "No." Ji Anji glanced at Tuoba Yan, and then he looked at Yi Xian. "She does." Yi Xian was speechless. Tuoba Yen rolled his eyes at Ji Anji. Yi Xian smiled. Don't worry, I'll definitely come back to Pine Prefecture. As for the two of you, you must take good care of yourselves. If you encounter any difficulties, you can contact Jiangjiu, Advisor Lu, and the others at any time, and they'll come to help immediately. Ji Anji nodded. All right. Yi Xian walked over to them and gave them a light hug. Take care. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left. Tuoba Yen suddenly said, Wait. Yi Xian stopped and turned around. Tuoba Yen hesitated for a moment, and then he walked over to Yi Xian and said softly, I'll wait for your return. His voice was very soft like the buzz of a mosquito. Yi Xian smiled. And then? Tuoba Yen glared at Yi Xian. And then die. Yi Xian laughed, and then he walked over to Tuoba Yan's ear and whispered something. Tuoba Yen immediately blushed, and then he threw a white jade bottle at Yi Xian, and said angrily, Get lost. Yi Xian put away the white jade bottle, chuckled, and turned to leave. Seeing Yi Xian disappear into the distance, Tuoba Yan's eyes suddenly became a little dazed. At this moment, she suddenly felt a little lost in her heart. Love? She did not think too much about it. She only knew that there seemed to be something more in her heart. After Yi Xian left the kingdom of Ning, he went directly to the Devil Sect. The Devil Sect's headquarters was built in an ancient city. The Devil Sect did not blindly kill. On the contrary, the Devil Sect had absorbed many cultivators from the Divine Central Continent. The current Devil Sect was gradually strengthening itself. In a large hall, the Devil Sect Master Ku Mingxiu was meditating. Suddenly, there was a cough in the hall. Ku Mingxiu opened his eyes abruptly. Not far away from him, a black-clothed man had appeared out of nowhere. The man's back was facing him, and his shadow was very long. Ku Mingxiu's expression instantly turned solemn when he saw this person. This was because he did not know how the person appeared, and he did not even notice when the person appeared. Most importantly, he could not sense any aura from the person in front of him. He could not sense any aura at all, as if the person did not exist. What kind of expert was this? Ku Mingxiu's forehead was already dripping with cold sweat. At this moment, the man in black suddenly said, Sect Master Ku, don't be afraid. The old man does not mean you any harm. Otherwise, your head would have been removed. His voice was a little hoarse. Ku Mingxiu calmed down and said in a deep voice, Senior, who are you? The man in black said, The old man has left the firmament world for too long. This name means nothing to the firmament world now. He had left the firmament world for too long. Ku Mingxiu's heart skipped a beat. Senior, why are you looking for me? The man in black nodded. Of course. Sect Master Ku seems to have forgotten something. Something? Ku Mingxiu was stunned. Senior, please enlighten me. The man in black said, Sect Master Ku once promised my disappointing disciple 1 billion supreme spiritual stones, but Sect Master Ku only paid me 500 million. Ku Mingxiu was stunned. In the next moment, his expression changed drastically. Yi Xian. Are you Yi Xian's master? The man in black nodded. Ku Mingxiu gulped. May I ask if you are Senior Firmament World Swordmaster? The man in black went silent for a while, then said softly, I never thought that after 1,000 years, there would still be someone who remembers the old man. Firmament World Sword Master. Ku Mingxiu's mind instantly went blank. He's still alive. Yi Xian did not lie to him. The Firmament World Sword Master was still alive and he had returned. The Firmament World Sword Master. He had once suppressed the Realm Protection Alliance with his own strength for 100 years, causing them to be unable to breathe. Moreover, he was once the publicly known #1 expert in the firmament world. At this moment, Ku Mingxiu's heart was in extreme shock. At this moment, the man in black suddenly said, "Sect Master Ku, one must be trustworthy. What do you think?" Ku Mingxiu quickly took out a storage ring. With a flick of his finger, the storage ring flew towards the black-clothed man. Then, he bowed deeply. "It's my fault. Now, I hope Senior can give these 500 million supreme spiritual stones to young Master Yi." The man in black nodded slightly as he put away the storage ring. "The old man is not here for a mere 500 million supreme spiritual stones." Ku Mingxiu quickly said, "Of course. How could Senior care about 500 million supreme spiritual stones? If Senior has any instructions, please let me know." The man in black nodded. "This time, the Realm Defense Alliance has targeted my disappointing disciple again and again. The old man is going to bring him to the Divine Central Continent to seek justice from the Realm Defense Alliance. However, my disappointing disciple is worried about some people in the Azure Province. For example, the Ning country and the Great Cloud Empire." Ku Mingxiu quickly said, "Don't worry, Senior. The Devil Sect will take good care of the Ning country and the Great Cloud Empire. We won't let the cultivators of the Divine Central Continent find trouble with them." The man in black nodded. "In that case, I'll have to trouble you." Ku Mingxiu smiled bitterly. "Of course not. However, I have a question. Since Senior is still alive, why didn't you show up personally? If that's the case, the Realm Defense Alliance won't dare to find trouble with young Master Yi again." The man in black shook his head. "Young man, if you don't temper yourself, how can you become a talent? The Realm Defense Alliance is a good training ground for you. Moreover, after the old man left the Azure Firmament world, the Realm Defense Alliance has become even more arrogant." Ku Mingxiu nodded in agreement. After Senior left, the Realm Defense Alliance began to suppress the forces of the Azure Firmament world in order to become the overlord. This time, the Azure Firmament world has undergone a great change and the spiritual qi has dried up. Not only does the Realm Defense Alliance want to weaken the forces of the Divine Central Continent, but they also want to take the origin heart of the Azure Province. The man in black smiled. "Don't worry, the Realm Defense Alliance won't be able to run around for long." Ku Mingxiu was shocked. "Senior, are you going to take action against the Realm Defense Alliance?" The man in black said, "The Realm Defense Alliance's actions have caused dissatisfaction among many people. Not only the forces of the Azure Firmament world are dissatisfied, but also some forces outside the Azure Firmament world. This time, the old man came back to bring my useless disciple to train. Secondly, it's naturally for the Realm Defense Alliance." Ku Mingxiu's eyelids twitched. As expected, the Firmament Swordmaster was going to take action against the Realm Defense Alliance. The Realm Defense Alliance's doomsday is coming. At this moment, the man in black suddenly said, "The old man shouldn't show himself for the time being. I'll have to trouble Sect Master Ku to deal with the matters of the Azure Province." After saying that, he walked out of the hall. Ku Mingxiu hurriedly bowed. "Senior, take care. Chapter 266. Ku Mingxiu heaved a sigh of relief after the black-clothed man left. He was still in shock. The Firmament Sword Master. He didn't expect the Firmament Sword Master to still be alive. Not only was he alive, but he had also returned to the Firmament world. Ku Mingxiu was glad that he didn't kill Yi Xian back then. Otherwise, not only would the Realm Protection Alliance be in trouble, but the Devil Sect would also be in trouble. Ku Mingxiu returned to his seat and said softly, "I'll have to be more cautious in the future." The black-clothed man left the Devil Sect silently without alerting anyone, just like how he came. In a mountain range, the black-clothed man stopped and took off his black clothes. The black-clothed man was none other than Yi Xian. Yi Xian heaved a sigh of relief. He had to admit that his trip to the Devil Sect was very risky. If Ku Mingxiu were to attack him, his cover would be blown. He was betting that Ku Mingxiu wouldn't dare to attack him. And he was right. After he used the Chaos Chi to conceal his aura, Ku Mingxiu couldn't see through him at all. Not only that, but Ku Mingxiu also couldn't sense his presence at all. Under such circumstances, Ku Mingxiu definitely wouldn't dare to attack him. Subconsciously, Ku Mingxiu had already regarded him as a terrifying old monster. Although he had successfully deceived Ku Mingxiu, he was still a little flustered. Under such circumstances, he would definitely be besieged if he made a mistake. Fortunately, he had successfully deceived Ku Mingxiu. In this way, he could leave Qingzhou with a peace of mind because Ku Mingxiu would protect the Ning country and the Great Cloud Empire for him. Without thinking further, Yi Xian turned around and left. His destination this time was the Divine Central Continent. 2 hours later, Yi Xian boarded a cloud ship heading to the Divine Central Continent. In a private room on the cloud ship, Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the bed, deep in thought. This time, the Realm Protection Alliance's target wasn't Yi Ling, but him, Yi Xian. If he didn't handle this properly when he arrived at the Central Divine Prefecture, not only would he not be able to help his younger sister, but he might even lose his life. It should be noted that the Divine Central Continent was the territory of the Realm Defense Alliance, and the Realm Defense Alliance was deeply rooted in the Divine Central Continent. Whether it was in terms of strength or influence, it was extremely powerful. If he went against the Realm Protection Alliance, the one who would suffer would definitely be him. One must be tough, but not recklessly tough. He had to think of a comprehensive plan. Time passed bit by bit. The cloud ship had already left Wanqiu Mountain and arrived at a vast sea. During this period of time, Yi Xian had been constantly studying the Central Divine Prefecture. In order to understand the Divine Central Continent, he had specially bought a history of the Divine Central Continent from Drunken Immortal Inn. The firmament world was divided into 3 great continents, the Central Divine Prefecture, the Kanglan Province, and the Azure Province. In truth, these 3 great continents were all connected. However, the distance between the 3 great provinces was rather far. Although there was a certain amount of communication between them, the gap between them was not small. The main reason was still the Divine Central Continent, because its martial art civilization was the most developed of the 3 great provinces. In the eyes of the native cultivators of the Divine Central Continent, whether it was the Azure Province or the Kanglan Province, they were both barbarian backwater lands. But this was normal, because the strength of the Divine Central Continent far surpassed that of the Azure Province and the Kanglan Province. The Divine Central Continent was divided into the Upper Realm and the Lower Realm, but it didn't mean that the forces in the Upper Realm were necessarily stronger than those in the Lower Realm. Some forces were able to stay in the Upper Realm because their ancestors were powerful enough to establish their own realm. Simply put, they had to rely on their ancestors. And there were a few powerful forces in the Lower Realm. Even the Realm Defense Alliance didn't dare offend them lightly. 1 sect, 1 sword, 1 lineage. 1 sect, the Mystic Sect, was the most mysterious force in the Divine Central Continent, even more mysterious than the Realm Defense Alliance. No one knew the location of the Mystic Sect's headquarters. All they knew was that the number 1 genius on the Divine Central Continent's senior-level genius ranking was a self-proclaimed member of the Mystic Sect. 1 sword was the Grey Sword Sect. The Grey Sword Sect had been at its most glorious when the Swordmaster of the Grey Realm was still around. At that time, the Grey Sword Sect had undoubtedly been the strongest force in the Green Firmament world, and even the Realm Defense Alliance had been suppressed. Although the Swordmaster of the Grey Realm was no longer around, no force dared to underestimate them. 1 lineage referred to the 10,000 Beasts mountain range. In the Green Firmament world, there was a group of powerful monsters that lived in the 10,000 Beasts mountain range. The true strength of the 10,000 Beasts mountain range had always been a mystery. Even the Realm Defense Alliance was afraid of the 10,000 Beast Mountain range. All in all, the Realm Defense Alliance wasn't absolutely the strongest force in the Divine Central Continent. In his room, Yi Xian put away the information. After a long period of contemplation, he began to cultivate. He was now at the Dharma realm, and what he needed to do was reach the Dharma realm before he entered the Divine Central Continent. In order to reach the Dharma realm, he had to learn how to use space. With the Space Dao Law, it wasn't difficult for him to accomplish that. In the following period of time, Yi Xian used the Space Dao Law to comprehend it. Although he could use the Space Dao Law to use space and even spatial decomposition, that was the ability of the Space Dao Law, not his own. What he needed to do was to be able to use space without borrowing the Space Dao Law. Finally, he would use space disintegration. It could be said that the Space Dao Law was his best master, at least until he reached the Dharma realm. 2 days later, the cloud ship arrived at an archipelago. At this moment, a voice came from the ship. "Everyone, the Thousand Clouds Island is up ahead. Mercenaries and pirates come and go there all year round, so please be careful." At this moment, Yi Xian walked out of the cloud ship. He would come out to bask in the sun at noon every day. At that moment, he did not reveal his true appearance. Instead, he was wearing a large gray robe that covered his entire body. It was no secret in the Azure Firmament world that the Realm Defense Alliance had placed a bounty on his head. Although he wasn't afraid of trouble, he didn't want to cause any trouble right now. It was better to keep a low profile. At this moment, a man and a woman arrived at Yi Xian's side. The man wore a white robe and held a white jade fan in his hand. He had a graceful bearing, while the woman wore a jade-green dress. Her features were delicate and pretty, and she was quiet and elegant. The man sized up Yi Xian and said with a smile, "Brother, you should have escaped from Azure Province as well, right?" "Escaped?" Yi Xian turned to look at the man, slightly puzzled. The man shook his head slightly. Azure Province has almost completely fallen into enemy hands. Many powerful clans and individuals are thinking of ways to escape Azure Province and head for the Divine Central Continent. After all, only the Divine Central Continent can be considered peaceful in the Azure Firmament world. Yi Xian nodded slightly, somewhat understanding. Although the rich and powerful clans couldn't resist in times of chaos, they had the ability to escape. Take the two people before him for example. They were probably either rich or noble. At any given time, it was actually the people at the bottom who were truly miserable. Meanwhile, the man suddenly said, "Actually, the main reason our Azure Province has fallen into such a state is because of that Yi Xian." Yi Xian was speechless. The man tapped his fan against his palm, and his eyes were filled with rage. I don't know how that Yi Xian offended the Realm Defense Alliance to the point that they actually issued an arrest warrant for him. It's exactly because of this arrest warrant that the Devil Sect, Ghost Sect, and countless cultivators from the Divine Central Continent were drawn here. Cultivators. Even if Yi Xian dies 10,000 times, it still won't be enough to atone for his crimes. Yi Xian was about to speak when the woman suddenly said, "Big brother, you can't blame Yi Xian for this. In my opinion, it's the Realm Defense Alliance's fault. Firstly, it's exactly because of their connivance that those cultivators from the Divine Central Continent dared to come to Azure Province. If they hadn't given the nod, would those cultivators have dared to act rashly in Azure Province? Secondly, even if Yi Xian offended the Realm Defense Alliance, why didn't they just go look for Yi Xian? In my opinion, Yi Xian is just an excuse the Realm Defense Alliance is looking for. It's an excuse for those cultivators from the Divine Central Continent to come to Azure Province." Yi Xian couldn't help but look at the woman, and he was slightly surprised. Meanwhile, the man grunted, "What do you know? It's exactly because of Yi Xian that the Realm Defense Alliance vented its anger on the entire Azure Province. If it wasn't for him, then it would be impossible for so many things to happen in Azure Province. Yi Xian is a jinx, he. Suddenly, Yi Xian turned around and slapped the man. Slap. A resounding slap resounded, and then the man was blasted over 10 m away. Everyone on the deck of the cloud vessel was stunned. The woman by Yi Xian's side gazed at Yi Xian with astonishment. Why did you hit him? Yi Xian said indifferently, it's rare to encounter such a weirdo, so I wanted to hit him. The woman. Nearby, the man who had been blasted away by Yi Xian stood up, wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, and then glared angrily at Yi Xian. You actually dared to hit me. Do you know that the steward of this cloud vessel is my uncle? Yi Xian suddenly vanished, and in the next moment. Slap. The man was blasted away again. Yi Xian clapped his hands, all the more reason to hit him. The man stood up again, and this time, besides rage, there was also fear in his eyes. Because he hadn't even been able to fight back just now. He was at the peak of the divine combination realm. The man didn't try to put on a brave front again. It didn't take long for an old man and 6 guards to appear on the cloud vessel's deck. All 6 of them had a small Zue character on their left chests. Immortal Indulgence Inn. Although the drunken Immortal Inn had announced that they would withdraw from Qingzhou, they actually didn't. They were still running some businesses, such as this cloud vessel business. When the old man saw the man's appearance, his face instantly turned cold, then he turned to look at Yi Xian. You did this? Yi Xian nodded. The old man stared at Yi Xian. Previously, he said that he was the old man's nephew, but you still wanted to attack him. It seems that you don't put my drunken Immortal Inn in your eyes. Yi Xian shook his head. I have no ill intentions towards the drunken Immortal Inn. The old man said coldly, Old man, I can see that you have a lot of ill intentions. Since you dare to attack me on the cloud vessel, I believe that you have some confidence. Tell me. Yi Xian shook his head, I'm just a rogue cultivator. The old man narrowed his eyes, I'll give you one last chance. If you don't tell me your background, this old man won't be polite. Yi Xian thought for a moment, then flicked his finger, and a dark golden token appeared in front of the old man. This token was given to him by the 5th floor master, and it was the highest grade of the drunken Immortal Inn. The old man glanced at the token and frowned, what rubbish is this? Saying that, he casually threw the cloud vessel down, then said, beat him to death, throw the cloud vessel away. Yi Xian. P.S. Let me explain why there are 2 updates today. I've been thinking for an entire night, and I finally thought of a reason that won't be scolded. Because today, that something came. Chapter 267. Yi Xian was stunned. He doesn't know him. He actually doesn't know him. That's the highest gold card of the Immortal Indulgence Inn. And it's been thrown away just like that. As soon as the old man finished speaking, the guards of the Immortal Indulgence Inn were about to attack. Meanwhile, the woman spoke abruptly, wait. She stood in front of Yi Xian as she spoke. At the same time, she waved her hand, and the black venerable card that the old man had thrown off the cloud ship flew back onto the cloud ship. Then it landed in her hand. Everyone gazed at the woman. The woman glanced at the black card, and her hand started to tremble as she looked at it. The old man frowned, little girl, what are you doing? The woman gazed at Yi Xian, and her voice was trembling slightly, is this a black card? Yi Xian spoke indifferently, take a guess. The woman took a deep breath, and then she gazed at the old man. The old man hurriedly walked over and snatched the black card. As he looked at it, his hands started to tremble as well. A black card. Naturally, he didn't know about it because he'd only heard of it. It was the highest black card of the Immortal Indulgence Inn, and one didn't just have to be rich to possess such a card, one had to be of status as well. How could a lowly manager like him have come into contact with such a person? Or perhaps, he'd never imagined that there would be a passenger with a black card on the ship. Moreover, Yi Xian was in an ordinary room. The old man's body trembled as he gazed at Yi Xian, say. Your Excellency. Old man. Old man is as blind as a bat. Yi Xian waved his hand, and then he pointed at the woman. From this moment onwards, she'll be the manager of the ship. The woman was stunned, and then she hurriedly shook her head. No, no. I can't. Yi Xian spoke indifferently. I think you can. The old man wanted to say something, but Yi Xian waved his hand. Leave. The old man naturally didn't dare to resist, and he immediately bowed deeply before he hurriedly pulled the man away with him. The woman hesitated for a moment before she said, Sir, the steward of the ship. Yi Xian said, Your uncle and brother are short-sighted and overly arrogant. If they were ordinary people, it would be fine. But if they were in power, there would be a great disaster in the future. The woman thought for a long time before she finally nodded. I understand. Yi Xian nodded. You may leave. The woman hesitated for a moment before she said, I'm Mo Lien. You can call me Little Lien. Please feel free to let me know if you need anything. After saying that, she bowed slightly, turned around and left. On the deck of the cloud ship, Yi Xian placed his hands behind his back and calmed himself down. There was only one day left before the Realm Defense Alliance would forcefully marry Yi Ling. He had to arrive at the Central Divine Prefecture by tonight. And with his current speed, if nothing unexpected happened, there should be no problem. Yi Xian slowly clenched his fists. At this moment, he was naturally burning with anxiety. Yi Ling. He didn't know if the Frost North sect would protect Yi Ling to the death. If they didn't protect Yi Ling and handed Yi Ling over. In short, he had to get to the Central Divine Prefecture as soon as possible. He wouldn't place his hopes on anyone else when it came to his younger sister. Right when the cloud ship was about to fly past the 1,000 Cloud Islands, an enormous net was suddenly cast down from above, and it instantly enveloped the entire ship. At the same time, 4 other black cloud ships suddenly appeared around the ship. It's the mercenaries and pirates. A shocked voice suddenly resounded from the ship. After that, the old steward that Yi Xian had dismissed hurried over to the front of the ship, and his eyes were filled with astonishment. A man in luxurious robes suddenly appeared above Yi Xian and the others. He looked down and was about to speak when Yi Xian suddenly said, Fuck off. Clouds. On the ship, the old man, Xiao Lian, and the others all looked at Yi Xian, their eyes filled with astonishment. In the air, the man in luxurious robes looked at Yi Xian with a ferocious expression. You told me to fuck off? Yi Xian shook his head. I've changed my mind. As he spoke, he raised a hand and pointed. Swish. A ray of sword light instantly pierced the man's forehead. In the air, the man in luxurious robes slowly fell. Everyone was dumbfounded. Yi Xian drew a line with his fingers, and a ray of sword light rippled out. The net that enveloped the cloud ship instantly shattered. Then, he turned to Xiao Lian. Keep going, don't stop. Xiao Lian was stunned, and then she hurriedly turned around and shouted, Don't stop, keep going. The cloud ship continued forward. In the distance, 6 cloud ships suddenly blocked the path of the cloud ship that Yi Xian was on. A dozen experts suddenly flew out from the 6 cloud ships. They were all in the Dharma realm. At the sight of this, everyone on the cloud ship that Yi Xian was on instantly turned pale. This was because there were only 2 Dharma realm experts on this cloud ship. The old man hesitated for a moment, and then he hurriedly bowed deeply to the sky. Everyone, this old man is the manager of the Drunken Immortal Inn. Please consider my Drunken Immortal Inn. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly flew out. The next moment, a scream sounded in the distance, and a bloody head slowly fell from the sky. After a few breaths, Yi Xian had returned to the cloud ship, and in the distance, a dozen heads fell from the sky in an orderly manner. On the cloud ship, everyone was petrified. Yi Xian sheathed his sword. Forward, speed up. The cloud ship continued forward. A moment later, only Yi Xian was left on the cloud ship. Obviously, the people on the cloud ship were more afraid of Yi Xian than they were grateful. The killing intent that Yi Xian emitted just now was too terrifying. At this moment, Xiaolian suddenly came behind Yi Xian. She glanced at Yi Xian and said softly, "Your identity should have been exposed." Obviously, she had already guessed Yi Xian's identity. Not only her, many people might have guessed it just now. Swordsman. There was only one famous swordsman in Qingzhou, and that was Yi Xian. Moreover, who in Qingzhou didn't know that Yi Xian was on good terms with the drunken immortal inn? It was completely possible that Yi Xian had the black card of the drunken immortal inn. Exposed identity? Yi Xian said softly, "It's fine." Xiaolian nodded and did not say anything else. She turned around and retreated. On the deck of the cloud ship, only Yi Xian was left. Yi Xian took out a small wooden figure. The small wooden figure had two whips tied to it, and it looked exactly like Yiling. Yi Xian said softly, "Don't worry, with me around, no one will dare to bully you." The cloud ship moved forward at top speed. 6 hours later, the cloud ship suddenly stopped. They had arrived. When the cloud ship stopped, Xiaolian came to the deck of the cloud ship. At this moment, the deck was already empty. Xiaolian was stunned for a moment before she said softly, "Gone." Just at this moment, an elderly suddenly appeared in the sky above the cloud ship. The elderly's soul trace swept across the cloud ship, but he didn't discover anything. Finally, the elderly's gaze fell onto Xiaolian. "Where's that swordsman?" Xiaolian's voice trembled. "Gone, already gone." The elderly turned his head and swept a glance at the surroundings. He shouldn't have gone far. Check the surroundings thoroughly. Saying that, he had already disappeared. Below, in a corner, Yi Xian said softly, "No wonder the Realm Protection Alliance is so well informed." Saying that, he turned around and left. The current him, as long as he didn't show himself, no one would be able to discover him. Sky Cloud City. Sky Cloud City was the central continent's largest city. This was the largest city in the prefecture, and the master behind this city was the Realm Defense Alliance. This city was so big that it could accommodate up to 100 million people. And the Realm Protection Alliance could rely on this city to earn at least 10 billion high-grade spirit stones every year. Sky Cloud City wasn't on the ground, but in the sky. It was about 800 feet above the ground and was built by the Realm Protection Alliance after spending a huge amount of money. Being in the city, it was like being in the clouds. Yi Xian spent 10 high-grade spirit stones to enter Sky Cloud City. This was the so-called entrance fee. Sky Cloud City could probably earn tens of millions of high-grade spirit stones from this entrance fee daily. At this moment, Yi Xian then realized that he was actually very poor. On this day, the city was decorated with lanterns and streamers, looking very festive. Because today was the day that Sky Cloud City's young city lord Lu Xianming was going to marry the Northern Chill sect saintess, Yiling. On this day, there were many powerhouses who came to Sky Cloud City in advance to congratulate. Among them, even the 3 sects and 5 families had sent people over. Lu Xianming obviously didn't have such a big influence, but his uncle did. Who didn't know that his uncle was the Realm Protection Alliance's Supreme Lu? In the city lord's residence, in one of the main halls, the sound of a lady's laughter could be heard from time to time, and occasionally there were some moaning sounds. And it wasn't just one. At the entrance of the hall, the 2 guards felt unbearably hot listening to it. At this moment, the guard on the left suddenly said, "Today is the young city lord's big day, but he still wants to mess around. If this gets out, I'm afraid that Northern Chill's sect will be angered to death." The guard on the right laughed, "Angered to death? Don't tell me that Northern Chill's sect doesn't know what kind of character young city lord has. They have no other choice. Who asked our young city lord to have Supreme Lu behind him? Speaking of this, he shook his head and laughed, when that saintess marries over, I'm afraid she'll have to suffer in the future." The guard on the left nodded slightly, "Don't say any more. The more you talk, the more you slip up. Be careful not to get into trouble." Very quickly, the outside of the hall quietened down. Not only the outside of the hall, even the inside of the hall quietened down. The two guards looked at each other and one of them transmitted his profound chi, "I'm afraid this young city lord is playing some tricks again, hee. In the hall. At this moment, a completely naked man was sweating profusely and his eyes were filled with terror. Because there was a sword at his throat. And in front of him stood a man in a grey robe. This man in a grey robe was Yi Xian. Around the two of them were 4 to 5 women lying on the ground. But at this moment, these 4 to 5 women had already fainted. The naked man was just about to speak when the sword suddenly moved forward. Swish! The naked man's throat split open and his voice was forcefully swallowed back. Yi Xian punched the man's head and he instantly fainted. Yi Xian kept the storage ring on the man's hand and he took out a white jade bottle. This was what he had gotten from Tuoba Yen. Yi Xian poured out a red elixir and fed it to the man. Then, he quietly took the man out of the hall. After dawn, a group of pig demons suddenly appeared at the gate of Sky Cloud City. And among this group of pig demons, there was a naked man with his head covered. And at this moment, this man was doing indescribably shameful things with these pig demons. Countless people were attracted by this scene and soon, more and more people gathered here. More and more people came and in the end, even the city walls were filled with people pointing and talking. And at this moment, the black cloth on the head of the man in the group of pig demons suddenly split open. At this moment, everyone saw the man's true face. When they saw the man's face, there was an uproar. It's young city lord Lu Xianming. F***ck. Lu Xianming dared to F***ck a pig. M. Chapter 268. Everyone had an interesting look on their faces. It was rare to see a good show like this. At that moment, a middle-aged man suddenly appeared at the city gate. It was the city lord of Sky Cloud City, Lu Feng. When he saw Lu Xianming still hugging a pig demon in the distance, Lu Feng's expression turned ugly. With a wave of his right hand, the group of pig demons instantly exploded. At that moment, Lu Xianming charged at the people around him like a madman. Seeing this, everyone's expression changed and they quickly retreated. Lu Feng suddenly shouted, "How dare you!" As soon as he finished speaking, he appeared in front of Lu Xianming and pressed his right hand on the top of Lu Xuanming's head. Lu Xuanming's body trembled violently, and after a while, his scarlet eyes gradually became clear. Lu Xianming looked around blankly, then looked at the pig demon corpses on the ground. In the next moment, he suddenly raised his head and roared, "Who is it? Who is it?" Lu Feng's expression was gloomy. He turned to look at two guards not far away. The two guards' expressions changed drastically, and they hurriedly knelt on one knee. One of the guards said, "City Lord, the young city lord forbade the two of us from entering the palace, so what's the use of having the two of you?" Lu Feng suddenly roared. In the next moment, he waved his right hand, and the bodies of the two guards exploded. Lu Feng coldly glanced at his surroundings. The faces of the people around him changed drastically, and they hurriedly turned around and fled. In front of the city gate, Lu Feng clenched his fists, his expression frighteningly gloomy. As for Lu Xianming, his facial features were twisted to the point of being deformed. Humiliation. The greatest humiliation of his life. He, Lu Xianming, would soon become the laughingstock of the entire divine central continent. Not only that, but when he thought about what had happened, Lu Xianming was like a raging beast, clenching his fists and roaring madly. Lu Feng turned to look to the side. There, an old man quietly appeared. The old man bowed slightly. This should be Yi Xian's doing. Who is Yi Xian? Lu Xianming turned to look at the old man with a ferocious expression. The old man said in a low voice, "The enemy of our realm defense alliance, is also Yi Ling's sister. This time, he should be after Yi Ling." Yi Ling. Lu Xuanming's expression was ferocious. After a while, he suddenly looked at Lu Feng and said, "Isn't today the day I'm marrying Yi Ling? Let's go and fetch the bride. The humiliation I suffered today, I will return it to his sister 100-fold." Lu Feng nodded. Of course, this grudge will be avenged. Then he turned to the side and said, "Send my order. Go to the frigid North clan to fetch the bride." The old man hesitated for a moment before he said, "That fellow, Yi Xian, will probably show himself again. Old man, follow him yourself." With that, he turned around and left. Very quickly, a huge cloud ship slowly rose up from Sky Cloud City. The cloud ship was decorated with lanterns and banners, looking extremely festive. The destination of this ship was the frigid North clan. What was worth mentioning was that Lu Xian's son Hell Pig's matter had swiftly spread throughout the entire Sky Cloud City, and moreover, it was spreading out of Sky Cloud City at an extremely fast speed. Lu Xianming wasn't very famous in the entire divine central continent, but his uncle was. Hence, as the news spread, it would eventually bring Supreme Lord Lu along. But when it spread to some further places, it became Supreme Lord Lu's son Hell Pig, Realm Defense Alliance. In the hall, Supreme Lord Lu's expression was extremely gloomy. Obviously, he already knew about what had happened in Sky Cloud City. After a while, Supreme Lord Lu looked at an old man below him. Still no news of Yi Xian's whereabouts? The old man shook his head. After this person entered the divine central continent, it was as if he had vanished into thin air. There's no news of him at all. According to my deduction, this person might have some sort of aura-concealing treasure on him. Otherwise, it's impossible that there's no trace of him at all. Moreover, this person had entered the governor's residence of Sky Cloud City, but the 3 true Imperial Realm experts in the residence didn't notice anything at all. Aura concealing. Supreme Lord Lu frowned slightly. Even true Imperial Realm experts were able to conceal him. The old man nodded. This person should have reached the 10,000 Dharma realm. Ordinary Imperial Realm experts are no match for him, and it's difficult for true Imperial Realm experts to discover him. This matter is a little troublesome. Supreme Lord Lu said calmly, "What's troublesome? Why did Yi Xian come to the divine central continent?" "Because of his sister, Yi Ling. As long as Yi Ling is still in Frost North sect, Yi Xian won't be able to run away." "Hasn't Xianming gone to Frost North sect?" "Bring some men with you. That Yi Xian will definitely appear." The old man hesitated for a moment before saying, "Supreme Lord, if that Sword Immortal appears, Sword Immortal." Supreme Lord Lu narrowed his eyes and kept silent for a long time. Finally, he said in a deep voice, "Our men should have reached the Endless Star regions by now. We should have information on that mysterious woman soon. As for this Yi Xian, if he appears, feel free to attack. If that mysterious woman appears." As he said that, he flicked his finger and a ray of white light appeared in front of the old man. "What's this?" The old man was slightly puzzled. Supreme Lord Lu said in a deep voice, "This is a clone of my lord. My lord personally bestowed it to me to deal with that mysterious woman. Remember, don't use this clone until the mysterious woman appears. Otherwise, the Realm Defense Alliance won't be able to restrain her. The old man carefully put away the ray of white light. He seemed to have thought of something and said, "Supreme Lord, Yi Xian isn't simple at all. Why don't you kill him yourself and not give him a chance?" Supreme Lord Lu glanced at the old man and said, "I still have important matters to attend to. If you're not confident, then bring 2 more true Imperial Dharma Realm experts with you. I don't believe that Yi Xian is so monstrous that he can even kill true Imperial Dharma Realm experts." The old man he turned around and left without saying another word. Supreme Lord Lu slowly closed his eyes in the hall. The mysterious woman appeared in his mind again. He actually wanted to go there himself, but he was still slightly fearful. One must know that the mysterious woman had killed a few true Imperial Dharma Realm experts in an instant. Even he couldn't kill a true Imperial Dharma Realm expert in an instant. Most importantly, the mysterious woman had broken the formation that his lord had set up in the firmament world with a single sword strike. Although his lord had given him a clone, he still wasn't confident. The terror of the mysterious woman had been deeply imprinted in his mind. This time, if he went there personally and the mysterious woman appeared again, his clone would be useless. Without a doubt, he would really die. Simply put, this time, he wanted to see if the mysterious woman would appear again when Yi Xian was in a desperate situation. If she didn't appear, then it would be great. A few true Imperial Dharma Realm experts were enough to kill Yi Xian. If she appeared, then he could protect himself. A moment later, Supreme Lord Lu stood up and came to the back of the hall. There was a pitch-black door at the back of the hall. Behind the door was a deep starry sky. Supreme Lord Lu bowed slightly. "My lord." After a moment of silence, a hoarse voice came from the door. "Track down that woman with all your strength. How dare she ruin my plans? I will destroy her body, imprison her soul, and let her suffer for 100 lifetimes." As soon as the voice fell, in a starry sky palace somewhere in the endless starry sky, a woman in a plain dress suddenly opened her eyes. She looked up and her expression gradually turned cold. "Incantation of truth. What kind of rubbish is this? How dare you cast an incantation of truth on me? Isn't it good to be alive?" As soon as she finished speaking, she opened her hand and an illusory sword quietly condensed in her palm. The woman in the plain dress got up and walked out of the hall. The sword in her hand trembled violently. At the same time, she opened her mouth and said, "In the name of my sword, I summon the spirits of the universe." "Who said this? Show yourself." As soon as she finished speaking, the sword in her hand suddenly flew out and entered the starry sky. Soon, the starry sky began to tremble. "How dare you!" At this moment, an angry roar suddenly sounded in the starry sky. "Who dares to disturb the order of the starry sky? Are you tired of living?" At the entrance of the palace, the woman in the plain dress raised her head and looked into the starry sky. There was a hint of mockery at the corner of her mouth. "Tired of living? If I don't want to die, who in this world can stop me? If I want someone to die, who can't? P.S. I've been sick with the flu recently. I've been dizzy for a day and I'm feeling weak all over. The flu has been terrifying recently. Everyone should really pay attention to keeping warm. Not only yourself, but also your family. Also, everyone should come out and take a look. Let me see you guys who are diving. Chapter 269. Arrogant. In the depths of the distant starry sky, an angry roar suddenly sounded. Then, a powerful pressure passed through the layers of space and crushed towards the woman in the plain dress. The power of the starry sky. At the entrance of the palace, the woman in the plain dress still had a hint of mockery. When the pressure arrived above her head, she pointed with her right hand. "Chi!" A ray of sword light shot into the sky. Boom! In the sky, the pressure instantly disappeared without a trace. After a moment of silence, an incredulous voice sounded from the distant starry sky. "You, who are you?" the woman in the plain dress sneered. "Do you think you can know my name?" As soon as she finished speaking, she raised her hand and waved. An illusory sword shot into the sky and entered the vast starry sky. The sword passed through the starry sky and the sword light was even more dazzling than the starlight. Not long after, in the distant starry sky, a scream suddenly sounded. Then, the starry sky fell into dead silence. At the entrance of the palace, the woman in the plain dress had her hands behind her back and her face was gloomy. Looking at the vast starry sky, her eyes gradually became a little dazed. But soon, they became cold again. At this moment, she was about to lose her patience. This was because the last time she received news about the other avatar, that avatar had already disappeared. She knew very well that if she did not have a choice, she would definitely not allow herself to disappear after finding him. Simply put, she must have encountered some trouble. And this trouble might not be small. Gradually, a scene from the past appeared in the woman's mind. In the mountain crevice, a little boy was hugging a little girl tightly. The little boy looked out of the mountain crevice in horror. Outside the mountain crevice, lightning flashed and thunder rumbled. Countless great demons roared wantonly. The entire world looked like it was doomsday. Although the little boy was extremely shocked, he kept comforting the little girl. "Ching, don't be afraid. Big brother is here, Big brother will protect you." The little girl hugged the little boy tightly. Although she was a little afraid, she felt very safe in her big brother's arms. In the middle of the night. "Big brother, I'm hungry." The little boy quickly took out a steamed bun and grinned. "Ching, eat, big brother, eat too." Big brother has eaten. "I'm not hungry, really." "Touch my belly." As he spoke, the little boy deliberately stuck out his little belly. The little girl believed him. In the middle of the night, the little boy hugged the little girl tightly. His face was extremely pale. He hugged the little girl tightly and said weakly, "Ching, Ching, Big brother remembers, you seem to like to practice swordsmanship." In a daze, the little girl nodded. "Ching, has to protect big brother, daddy, and mommy," the little boy suddenly cried. However, the little girl in the black clothes did not see it. After the little girl fell asleep, the little boy gently kissed the little girl's forehead. "Ching, if you become strong in the future, you must protect those who are as weak as us. Mother and father. If there was someone to protect them, they wouldn't have died. Also, that whatever God. They're so bad, beat them to death. Brother, I'm so hungry, so hungry." As he spoke, the little boy seemed to have thought of something, and his tears flowed like a broken dam. "Brother, I'm not afraid of death, but I'm afraid of what will happen to Ching, after I die. You're still so young, Daybreak." The little boy hugged the little girl motionlessly, his body already cold. The little girl buried the little boy in the mountain crevice and knelt there for the entire night. The next day, the little girl got up and left. In her hand, there was still half a steamed bun. Her brother could eat it, but he had left his last bit of hope for her. In the starry sky, in front of the palace entrance, the woman in the plain dress stood for a long time. 2 streaks of tears had appeared on her cold cheeks. After a long time, the woman in the plain dress said softly, "If anything happens to you, I'll destroy all living beings and let them be buried with you. Don't worry, I'll be with you. Without you, what's the point of reaching the peak of swordsmanship?" After saying that, the woman walked into the palace. At the same time, her emotionless voice suddenly rang through the entire palace. "I have run out of patience." In the palace, countless experts trembled. Azure World, Divine Central Continent. Sky Cloud City's wedding procession entered the Frosty North territory. At that moment, everyone in the Frosty North sect was furious. Who in the Divine Central Continent didn't know Lu Xuanming's character? Moreover, Lu Xianming had just done something so shocking and shameful. Now, Sky Cloud City was here to escort a bride, and it was the Holy Maiden of the Frosty North sect. This was a slap in the face. A vicious slap in the face of the Frosty North sect. In the Frosty North Hall, everyone from the Frosty North sect had gathered. Yi Ling was also there. She sat beside Shen Weiyang, dressed in an ice dress and looked very beautiful. Even though Yi Ling was still young, anyone could tell that she would definitely become a devastatingly beautiful woman in the future. Shen Weiyang looked around. The Realm Defense Alliance and Sky Cloud City are obviously using their power to suppress us. What do you think? Below, a woman said in a low voice, "Sect Master, is there really no room for negotiation?" Shen Weiyang shook her head. "I don't think so." The woman below fell silent. "Let's shed all pretense of cordiality." At this moment, a beautiful woman suddenly said, "Although our Frosty North sect is not as good as the Realm Defense Alliance, we will not be bullied so easily. If we don't resist to the end, our Frosty North sect will become the laughing stock of the entire Divine Central Continent." Below, some echoed in agreement. The Realm Defense Alliance and Sky Cloud City's forceful marriage was undoubtedly a great humiliation to the Frosty North sect. At this moment, someone suddenly said, "If we fall out with them, it is equivalent to declaring war on the Realm Defense Alliance. And if we declare war, our Frosty North sect has no chance of winning." Someone sneered, "Without any chance of winning, are we going to let the Realm Defense Alliance bully us like this?" However, this matter is of great importance and we need to be cautious. Otherwise, once the flames of war start, it will be a disaster for our Frosty North sect. Everyone in the hall was silent. Because the Frosty North sect could not defeat the Realm Defense Alliance. Just at this moment, a voice suddenly sounded. "Why don't we feign civility first?" Everyone turned to look. The one who spoke was a beautiful woman. She was the great elder of the Frosty North sect, Lu Yun. Yi Ling took a look at Lu Yun, her eyes cold. She didn't like this great elder. Because originally, the sacred lady of the Frosty North sect was not her, but the great elder's granddaughter. But after she came, the sacred lady of the Frosty North sect became her. Hence, the great elder would occasionally cause trouble for her. Lu Yun said indifferently, "Everyone, the spiritual energy in the Divine Central Continent is getting thinner by the day, especially in our Frosty North territory. Many places in our Frosty North territory have already started to melt. Under such circumstances, if our Frosty North sect were to start a war with the Realm Defense Alliance, forgive me for being blunt, what awaits us is the destruction of the sect." The destruction of the sect. Everyone's expressions were grave. No one wanted the sect to be destroyed. At this moment, someone suddenly said, "Are we really going to marry the sacred lady to that scum?" Lu Yun said indifferently, "Sacred lady? That's the sacred lady of the Frosty North sect. Since you're the sacred lady of our Frosty North sect, then you should naturally think for our sect. Otherwise, what's the point of having a sacred lady who takes up so many cultivation resources by herself but doesn't do anything for our Frosty North sect at a critical moment?" Yi Ling glanced at Lu Yun, "Grand Elder, I, Yi Ling, am the sacred lady of the Frosty North sect. If my Frosty North sect were to hand me over now, then it wouldn't just be me, Yi Ling, but the Frosty North sect and our ancestors." When she spoke up to this point, she stood up and bowed slightly to Lu Yun. "I know that my arrival caused the Grand Elder's granddaughter to lose her position as the sacred lady. I'm very sorry for that. However, I still hope that the Grand Elder can set aside his personal feelings for now and work together to face this together. Because without the Frosty North sect, the Grand Elder isn't the Grand Elder anymore, and I'm no longer the sacred lady. What do you think? As soon as she finished speaking, everyone here nodded. Especially Shen Weiyang, she didn't conceal the admiration in her eyes at all. Under the Frosty North sect's full support, Yi Ling had grown greatly in all aspects. On the other hand, Lu Yun's expression was a bit ugly. Although Yi Ling's words were gentle, they were as sharp as a knife, and they immediately gained everyone's approval. If she said anything more, then she would be the one who didn't see the bigger picture. Without saying anything else, Lu Yun retreated to the side, but she was still a bit unwilling to give up. She immediately said, "Let me remind you, this time the Realm Defense Alliance targeted the Frosty North sect and the Sacred Lady because of that Yi Xian. If we don't hand over Yi Xian, the Frosty North sect. How dare you?" At this moment, Yi Ling suddenly flew into a rage. A powerful aura suddenly swept out from her body and headed straight for Lu Yun. Everyone was stunned. Obviously, they didn't expect Yi Ling to suddenly attack. In the distance, Lu Yun waved her right hand and directly dispelled the pressure from Yi Ling. She looked coldly at Yi Ling. How impudent. Is this the Sacred Lady of the Frosty North sect? Yi Ling stared at Lu Yun. If you dare to do anything to my brother, I will definitely kill you. How dare you? Lu Yun said angrily, don't think that you can do whatever you want just because you're the Sacred Lady. Let me tell you, the Sacred Lady was given to you by the Frosty North sect, not your brother. Enough. On the side, Shen Weiyang suddenly spoke. Lu Yun didn't say anything, but her expression was extremely cold. Shen Weiyang next to her looked at Yi Ling, apologized to the Great Elder. Yi Ling directly shook her head, no. Shen Weiyang frowned, Xiaoling, you're not young anymore. You really shouldn't be so stubborn. Apologize to the Great Elder. Yi Ling said coldly, no. Who told her to say that about my brother? Shen Weiyang looked a bit unhappy. Is your brother more important than the Frosty North sect in your heart? Yi Ling answered without thinking, my brother is more important than my life. Hearing this, there was an uproar. But Shen Weiyang flew into a rage, how dare you? You're a traitor. As soon as she finished speaking, a powerful pressure enveloped Yi Ling. Yi Ling couldn't take it anymore. Her legs buckled and she knelt down. Yi Ling felt wronged and started crying. Brother. In her most helpless and difficult times, the first person she would think of was her brother. Just then, a man suddenly appeared at the entrance of the Frosty North sect's main hall. Everyone in the field turned their heads in succession. It was Yi Xian. Yi Xian walked slowly to Yi Ling and said with a trembling voice, don't cry. I'll take you home. Chapter 270. Heartache. That was how Yi Xian felt at the moment. Yi Ling had always been by his side since they were young. Even though the two of them had led a tough life, he had always tried his best not to let Yi Ling suffer. Even though the two of them had led a tough life, there was joy amidst the hardship. Yi Xian felt as if his heart was being stabbed when he saw Yi Ling crying. No matter how special her physique was or how monstrous her talent was, she would always be a child in his heart. Everyone was stunned when they saw Yi Xian. Obviously, they hadn't expected Yi Xian to show up here. Shen Weiyang and the others looked at each other. In the end, Shen Weiyang looked at Yi Xian. How did you get in here? At this moment, Shen Weiyang and the others were slightly shocked. Because the Frosty North territory was guarded by all sorts of powerful cultivators. Besides the powerful cultivators, there were also some powerful formations. Unless one was a true Imperial Dharma realm cultivator, ordinary people wouldn't be able to enter the main hall of the Frosty North sect without making a sound. But Yi Xian was obviously not a true Imperial Dharma realm cultivator. Yi Xian paid no attention to Shen Weiyang. He walked up to Yi Ling and slashed with his sword. Boom! The pressure that was pressing down on Yi Ling was instantly shattered by Yi Xian's sword. Shen Weiyang and the others instantly became solemn when they saw this. After all, Shen Weiyang was a true Imperial Dharma realm cultivator. Even though she hadn't used her full strength, it was still the pressure released by a true Imperial Dharma realm cultivator. But Yi Xian had destroyed it with a single strike. Everyone looked at each other with a wisp of shock in their eyes. Yi Xian paid no attention to the people of the Frosty North sect. He helped Yi Ling up and a gust of cold air instantly spread towards him. He was shocked and quickly released his kindness sword intent to resist the cold air. However, he was surprised to find that his kindness sword intent was actually unable to resist the cold air. The cold air around Yi Ling was even more terrifying than before. Brother! At this time, Yi Ling suddenly threw herself into Yi Xian's arms. She hugged Yi Xian tightly and cried like a child. No one knew how many days and nights she had missed her brother. In the frigid North sect, she only did 2 things a day. The first was to cultivate, and the second was to miss her brother. No one knew what her brother meant to her. For Yi Xian, his younger sister was the biggest taboo in his life, and for Yi Ling, wasn't it the same? Yi Xian gently hugged Yi Ling. At the moment, he was calm and happy. At this moment, he was very satisfied. The people of the frigid North sect just stared at the siblings. Shen Weiyang's face was a little gloomy. Actually, she was quite fearful of Yi Xian as well. Because how could someone who was so wanted by the Realm Defense Alliance and still alive be an ordinary person? Especially Kuraki Academy. The Kuraki Academy of the Central Divine Prefecture wasn't inferior to the frigid North sect, but it was now inferior to even a third-rate power. Mysterious. In Shen Weiyang's opinion, Yi Xian was undoubtedly quite mysterious. Meanwhile, Yi Xian wiped off the tears on Yi Ling's face and smiled, "Big brother will take you away." Yi Ling nodded and held tightly onto Yi Xian's arm. "Go?" Lu Yun suddenly laughed coldly. "Yi Xian, you seem to have forgotten that this is the frigid North sect, not your Pine Prefecture." Yi Xian suddenly turned around and glared angrily at Lu Yun. "The frigid North sect is nothing. I don't even fear the Realm Defense Alliance, so why would I fear your frigid North sect? You!" Lu Yun flared up with rage and was about to attack. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly pointed his sword at Lu Yun. "Old bastard, try and touch me. Let's see if your frigid North sect can survive until tomorrow." "How dare you!" Lu Yun was furious and was about to attack. Meanwhile, Shen Weiyang suddenly said, "Stop." Lu Yun turned around to look at Shen Weiyang and said angrily, "He insulted me like this, so why should I stop?" As she spoke, she was about to attack. However, a wave of pressure pressed down upon her. It was Shen Weiyang's pressure. Lu Yun turned around to look at Shen Weiyang. Shen Weiyang spoke via voice transmission. "Why don't you ask him how he got into my frigid North sect? How could he have snuck into my frigid North sect without any help? Would the Realm Defense Alliance play such tricks if he didn't have any backing?" Lu Yun gradually calmed down when she heard this. The Realm Defense Alliance. Only then did she remember that even the Realm Defense Alliance couldn't do anything to this person. Yi Xian didn't care about Lu Yun and the people of the frigid North sect. He grabbed Yi Ling and turned to leave. Just then, Shen Weiyang suddenly appeared in front of him and Yi Ling. Shen Weiyang stared at Yi Xian. "She is the Holy Virgin of the frigid North sect. Where are you taking her?" Yi Xian said indifferently, "I am her brother. I can take her wherever I want." Shen Weiyang said coldly, "Yi Xian, don't be unreasonable. Making trouble out of nothing?" Yi Xian's expression was ferocious. "If not for the fact that the frigid North sect did her a favor and that you made her kneel down, I would have destroyed the frigid North sect a long time ago." Shen Weiyang narrowed her eyes and there was murderous intent in them. "Yi Xian, I know that you have a powerful background. But do you really think the frigid North sect is afraid of you? Yi Xian didn't speak. He pointed his sword at Shen Weiyang. Let's fight one-on-one. Hearing this, Shen Weiyang's expression turned cold. How could she tolerate such a provocation? She slammed her palm down and a strong wave of coldness pressed down on Yi Xian. Yi Xian stomped his right foot and a strong wave of sword will swept out from his body. Evil sword will. At the same time, Yi Xian slashed down with his sword. One strike to decide life and death. Seeing this, Shen Weiyang's lips curled into a mocking smile. She moved her finger and the power in Yi Xian's sword began to disintegrate. Spatial disintegration. The scariest part of the true defense level. But at this moment, a mysterious force suddenly wrapped around Yi Xian's sword, as well as the power and sword will in his sword. Spatial disintegration was ineffective. Shen Weiyang was shocked. At this moment, Yi Xian's sword descended. Boom! The wave of coldness shattered instantly and turned into a wave of air that shook the surroundings. Yi Xian was pushed back a few meters while Yi Ling hurried to him and said anxiously, "Brother, are you hurt?" Yi Xian shook his head but he was excited. It really worked. Before coming here, he'd imagined using the Space Dao Law's spatial cage to protect his sword technique so that he could fight against a true defense-level powerhouse. But he hadn't expected it to work. Because his spatial cage had forcefully blocked Shen Weiyang's spatial disintegration. Without the spatial disintegration, a true defense-level powerhouse wasn't so terrifying to Yi Xian. Opposite Yi Xian, Shen Weiyang stared at Yi Xian. Besides disbelief, there was a trace of fear in her eyes. How did you do it? At this moment, she was extremely shocked. Because her spatial disintegration had actually been ineffective. Ineffective. This was the first time she had encountered such a situation. Yi Xian didn't answer Shen Weiyang. He pulled Yi Ling and was about to leave and Granny Ling suddenly appeared in front of him and Yi Ling. Just as Yi Xian was about to speak, Yi Ling suddenly said softly, "Brother, Granny Ling is very good to me." Hearing that, Yi Xian's expression softened and he bowed to Shen Weiyang. "Thank you for taking care of Ling, all this time, senior. I, Yi Xian, will remember this." Granny Ling sighed softly. "I'm from the Frosty North sect. If you really remember this, you should let her stay in the Frosty North sect. Staying in the Frosty North sect is the best place for her." Yi Xian shook his head. "I don't want her to suffer any grievances." "How can she grow if she doesn't suffer?" Granny Ling retorted. "She has to grow up eventually. She should learn to be independent and strong. If she stays with you all the time, your pampering will harm her instead. What do you think?" Yi Xian fell silent. Seeing that Yi Xian was silent, Granny Ling was relieved. She had finally realized something. Yi Xian was a man who could be persuaded by reason but not cowed by force. If you talked to him nicely, he would listen to you. However, if you tried to threaten him and force him, he would be even fiercer than you. No, this guy would start a fight if you didn't agree with him. At this moment, Granny Ling looked at Yi Ling. "You've been devouring the treasure of the Frosty North sect for some time now. You'll be able to use it in a few days. By then, you'll be even more powerful. If you leave the Frosty North sect now, all your previous efforts will be in vain without the suppression of the cold here." Yi Ling lowered her head. "I want to stay with my brother," Granny Ling smiled and said, "but you're not as strong as your brother now. You won't be able to help him if you stay by his side. Not only will you not be able to help him, but you might even become his burden. Do you want that?" She knew Yi Ling's temper very well. She couldn't force him. She might look weak, but she was actually very stubborn. "Are we just going to let what happened just now go?" At this moment, Lu Yun suddenly said, Yi Xian barged into the Frosty North sect and attacked the sect master. He completely ignored the Frosty North sect and, she then pointed at Yi Ling, who was not far away. She's the holy lady of the Frosty North sect, but she's with an outsider. What right does she have to be the holy lady of the Frosty North sect? My brother isn't an outsider. Yi Ling glared at Lu Yun. He's my brother. Lu Yun said ferociously, is your brother more important than the Frosty North sect? Yi Ling was about to speak when Yi Xian suddenly dashed forward with his sword, and a beam of sword light slashed at Lu Yun. One strike to decide life and death. Lu Yun's expression changed. She hadn't expected Yi Xian to attack. However, she wasn't afraid at all. She pointed with her finger and an icicle suddenly shot out from the tip of her finger. At the same time, the space around Yi Xian's sword started to distort. Spatial distortion. Spatial manipulation. She's only at the spell manipulation realm. Yi Xian was stunned. He'd thought that Lu Yun was at least at the spell manipulation realm, but she was only at the spell manipulation realm. Yi Xian didn't think too much and twisted his right hand. Hiss. The spatial energy was shattered and the space returned to normal. At the same time, Yi Xian's sword broke Lu Yun's icicle and pressed against her forehead. Everyone was dumbfounded. One strike. He subdued Lu Yun with one strike? Yi Xian was actually surprised as well because he didn't expect the great elder of Frosty North sect to be so weak. Without much thought, Yi Xian patted Lu Yun's ugly face with his sword. Are you silly? Let me ask you, are you silly? My sister has such a powerful brother, isn't it a good thing for your Frosty North sect? You even F***king offended my brother and sister. Tell me, is your brain filled with sh**t? Damn it, even Mo Yunchi is smarter than you. Everyone, at this moment, a lady suddenly ran in. Sect Master, the people from Sky Cloud City are here. They want us to hand over the sacred lady. Hearing that, Yi Ling hurriedly looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian grinned and patted his shoulder. Don't be afraid, even if the sky falls, I'll carry it. P.S. I asked you to come out and some of you really fought. Are you demons? Don't you have anything to say to me? Chapter 271. Brother will bear it. Yi Ling looked at Yi Xian and her heart was filled with happiness. She walked towards Yi Xian and gently hugged Yi Xian's arm and gave a sweet smile. I'll bear it together with brother. Hearing that, Yi Xian couldn't help but burst out laughing. At this moment, Shen Weiyang suddenly said, this time round, just Sky Cloud City alone has at least 3 true Imperial Magic Realm experts. And in the dark, there must be other strong practitioners from the Realm Protection Alliance. If you bring her out, the both of you will definitely die today. Yi Xian smiled, otherwise, what should we do? Shen Weiyang looked straight at Yi Xian and transmitted her profound qi. Yi Xian, you should be very clear that the Realm Protection Alliance's real target is you. As long as you go out, then Yi Ling will be safe. Yi Xian shook his head and laughed. What you mean is, I should surrender and let them do whatever they want to me, in exchange for my sister's safety, right? Shen Weiyang replied calmly, that will depend on your own choice. If I surrender, but they still refuse to let my sister off? Yi Xian asked. Shen Weiyang frowned slightly, their target is only you. Yi Xian shook his head and interrupted Shen Weiyang's words, surrender? How stupid do I have to be to do such a silly thing? He had never placed his hopes on others, especially on the enemy. Believing that the enemy would be benevolent? Only a fool would believe that. Yi Xian walked in front of Shen Weiyang. Now, Cold North Sect has 2 choices. First, protect my sister and directly send out their top exponents to start a war with Sky Cloud City and the Realm Protection Alliance. Second, I will bring my sister away and all the consequences will be borne by the both of us. Attitude. What he wanted now was Cold North Sect's attitude. Hearing Yi Xian's words, the entire scene suddenly quietened down. Yi Xian's attitude was very clear. Leaving Yi Ling behind would mean that Cold North Sect would start a war with Sky Cloud City and the Realm Protection Alliance. If he chose the second option, it meant that Yi Xian would take Yi Ling with him, and nothing would happen to the frigid North Sect. Two choices. This was a big problem for the frigid North Sect. Because the frigid North Sect had already paid a huge price to train Yi Ling. If they gave up now, it would be a huge loss. But if they didn't give up, it meant that they had to face Sky Cloud City and the Realm Protection Alliance. The current frigid North Sect might be able to fight against these two forces, but they would definitely lose in the end. Should he fight or not? Everyone in the surroundings gazed at Shen Weiyang. Yi Xian was also waiting for Shen Weiyang's answer. In fact, the frigid North Sect had a third option, which was to capture Yi Xian and hand Yi Xian over to the Realm Protection Alliance. In that case, the Realm Protection Alliance might let go of Yi Ling. However, Shen Weiyang didn't dare to touch Yi Xian. If she touched Yi Xian, not only would she offend the forces behind Yi Xian, she would also completely offend Yi Ling. A sacred lady who hated the sect, she didn't even dare to think about the consequences. At this moment, Lu Yun suddenly said, "Sect Master, the sacred lady is a human, but aren't the thousands of frigid North Sect disciples also human? If a war breaks out, how many of them can survive?" Yi Ling, who was standing beside Yi Xian, stared at Lu Yun. "Brother, this old hag is very evil." Hearing Yi Ling's words, Lu Yun was furious, but she didn't dare to make a move, not even a word of threat. Because Yi Xian's power was just too terrifying. Not far away, Shen Weiyang looked around and saw that all the frigid North Sect disciples were looking at her. After a while, she sighed and turned around. "Take her away. Take Yi Ling away." As soon as she said that, Lu Yun instantly laughed and some of the frigid North Sect disciples around them heaved a sigh of relief. However, some of the frigid North Sect disciples were a little sad. This chapter is not over, please continue to the next page. They still had some feelings for Yi Ling, especially Granny Leng. The moment Shen Weiyang made her decision, she quickly said, "Sect Master, she is the future hope of the frigid North Sect. If we give up on her, the frigid North Sect," Lu Yun shook her head, "she is a human, but are the rest of the frigid North Sect not human? If thousands of frigid North Sect disciples die because of her, then we are the real sinners of the sect." Granny Leng wanted to say something but Lu Yun shook her head. "The frigid North Sect can't start a war with the Realm Defense Alliance and Sky Cloud City. Even if we start a war, we might not be able to protect her. And her heart is on the outsider's side, so there's not much point in keeping her." Lu Yun quickly said, "Sect Master is right. Even if the frigid North Sect starts a war for her, if we lose, not only will she die, but everyone in the frigid North Sect will also die. It doesn't matter if we die, but if the frigid North Sect disappears from the world, how will we face our ancestors?" Granny Leng looked at the crowd and shook her head with a sigh. "If the frigid North Sect gives up on her, do you know how the cultivators of the Divine Central Continent will look at us? The cultivators of the Divine Central Continent will think that the frigid North Sect is afraid of death and that we're willing to give up on our most monstrous genius to protect ourselves. Death isn't scary, what's scary is losing the courage of the frigid North Sect." Lu Yun said coldly, "Courage? Is fighting the Realm Defense Alliance considered courage? The frigid North Sect has existed for more than 1,000 years. Once we start a war with the Realm Defense Alliance, the frigid North Sect may cease to exist. Is courage more important, or the thousands of disciples of the frigid North Sect more important?" Granny Leng ignored Lu Yun and looked at Shen Weiyang. Shen Weiyang remained silent. Next to her, Yi Xian pulled Yi Ling out of the hall. As if he had thought of something, Yi Xian stopped at the entrance of the hall with Yi Ling. He turned around and said, we siblings clearly distinguish between gratitude and grudges. The frigid North sect must have spent a lot to nurture my sister. We won't take advantage of her. With that, he pointed a finger, and a storage ring flew to Shen Weiyang. Shen Weiyang was about to refuse, but when she scanned the ring with her divine sense and discovered that there were 1 billion supreme-grade spirit stones inside, she immediately swallowed her words. 1 billion supreme-grade spirit stones. This was not a small amount, especially in this era where spirit chi was thin. This many supreme-grade spirit stones could be used for too many things. Shen Weiyang put the ring away and glanced at Yi Xian and Yi Ling. In the end, she looked at Yi Ling, "You have the sacred relic of the frigid North sect with you. It's not a good time to take it by force. I hope that you can return it in the future." Yi Ling nodded. "I'll return it to the frigid North sect if I can." Shen Weiyang nodded and did not say anything else. Just when Yi Xian was about to leave with Yi Ling pointed at Granny Ling. "Brother, Granny Ling treats me very well." Yi Xian rubbed Yi Ling's head gently. Then, he pointed his finger, and a storage ring flew in front of Granny Ling. There were 1 billion supreme-grade spirit stones in the storage ring. Granny Ling was moved. 1 billion supreme-grade spirit stones was actually quite a fortune to her. No, it should be a lot. Just then, Yi Ling waved at Granny Ling. "Granny Ling, brother, and I will come back to see you in the future." With that, the two siblings left the hall. In the hall, Granny Ling sighed. Actually, she had been worried since the beginning that the frigid North sect would not be able to withstand the pressure from the Realm Protection Alliance. However, her worry became reality in the end. This time, the frigid North sect had not only lost a super genius, but also lost their pride and dignity. Outside the hall, Yi Xian held Yi Ling's hand and walked out. Yi Ling's face was filled with a bright smile. On the way, Yi Ling suddenly asked, "Brother, if the frigid North sect starts a war with the Realm Protection Alliance because of me, will you really let me stay in the frigid North sect?" Yi Xian nodded. "This chapter is not finished. Please continue." "Yes, because staying in the frigid North sect will benefit you a lot." Actually, there was something that he did not say. If the frigid North sect was really willing to fight the Realm Protection Alliance to the death for Yi Ling, then he would go out and attract all the hatred to himself. Not only would he not let Yi Ling face the Realm Protection Alliance, he would also not let the frigid North sect face the Realm Protection Alliance. What Yi Xian wanted was an attitude from the frigid North sect. An attitude towards Yi Ling. And he was disappointed. He knew that if it was not for him, if Yi Ling stayed in the frigid North sect, she might be abandoned by the frigid North sect in the future. As if he had thought of something, he lowered his head and looked at Yi Ling. "Is it the frigid North sect's fault?" Yi Ling lowered her head slightly and kept quiet. After a while, she looked up at Yi Xian. "Do you think I'm wrong?" Yi Xian rubbed Yi Ling's little head and smiled. "Not at all. Remember, no one is born to owe anyone anything. The frigid North sect does not owe me, nor do they owe you. If they are willing to fight the Realm Protection Alliance to the death for you, I will be grateful for it for the rest of my life. If they are not willing, it's all right. We will face our own matters." Yi Ling nodded her little head. "I understand. Oh, brother, sometimes I feel that you are very long-winded, but I also like to hear you being long-winded." Hearing that, Yi Xian instantly burst out laughing. He doted on Yi Ling, but he would not spoil Yi Ling. Because spoiling a person would often be harming the person. Just at this moment, the siblings stopped. In the distant sky, stood a middle-aged man. Beside him, there was a young man. Sky Cloud City Lord Lu Feng and young City Lord Lu Xianming. Behind the two of them stood 3 elders. The 3 of them were all true Imperial Realm experts. Including Lu Feng, there were a total of 4 true Imperial Realm experts. Other than that, there were 10 over people around them. These people were all in the Imperial Realm. This lineup was enough to easily take down Azure Province. But in the Divine Central Continent, it was probably just average. Not far in front of Yi Xian, Lu Xianming glared at Yi Xian. "Bastard, did you do this?" Yi Xian frowned. "Who are you talking about, bastard?" "You, of course." Lu Xianming said fiercely, "You lowly bastard." At this point, he was stunned. Something seemed wrong. Opposite him, Yi Xian nodded. He said seriously, "That scumbag is talking about me." Beside Yi Xian, Yi Ling could not help but cover her mouth and laugh. "Arg!" Lu Xianming roared, then directly rushed towards Yi Xian. The moment Lu Xianming rushed out, Lu Feng's expression changed greatly. He was about to make a move, but at this time, not far away, Lu Xianming stopped. Between his brows, there was a sword. Lu Xianming looked at Yi Xian in disbelief. He did not expect that he would be defeated just like that. He did not even have the strength to fight back. Lu Feng stared at Yi Xian. "If you dare to hurt a hair on his head." At this time, Yi Xian held the sword and slashed down. Swoosh! Lu Xuanming's entire arm was sent flying. Lu Xianming immediately screamed like a pig being slaughtered. Yi Xian looked at Lu Feng and smiled viciously. "How dare you have designs on my sister? Do you know how to write the word death?" As he said this, he swung the sword. Swoosh! Lu Xuanming's head was sent flying. At the same time, Yi Xian quickly swung the sword. Soon, Lu Xuanming's body was instantly disintegrated into the word death. Yi Xian turned around and pointed at Lu Feng with the sword. "Do you understand how to write it like this?" End of this chapter. Chapter 272. Rage. Yi Xian was naturally enraged. Whoever dared to harm his sister, Yi Xian would not rest until he was dead. For his sister, Yi Xian was not afraid of anything. Nearby, Lu Feng's expression turned savage when he saw Lu Xianming being dismembered. In the next moment, he charged at Yi Xian with a shake of his body. Due to his incredible speed, Lu Feng caused the space around him to tremble. It was a terrifying sight to behold. It was rare to see someone in the true Imperial magic realm to be able to move so quickly. If it had been the Yi Xian of the past, he would not have been able to fight back against a cultivator of this level. But now, with the law of space, he could fight against a true Imperial magic realm cultivator. As soon as Lu Feng disappeared from where he stood, Yi Xian leaped up and slashed down with his sword. Boom! In the sky, along with the sound of an explosion, Yi Xian retreated rapidly. This time, he retreated nearly 1,000 feet. However, Lu Feng was also pushed back more than 200 zhang. In the distance, Lu Feng looked at his palm. His palm was covered in cracks, which were caused by Yi Xian's sword. Lu Feng narrowed his eyes. There was less contempt in his eyes and more seriousness. Yi Xian, on the other hand, was excited. He realized that after borrowing the law of space, the gap between him and a true Imperial magic realm cultivator was not that great. He could fight back. With this thought in mind, Yi Xian's fighting spirit soared. He pointed at Lu Feng and pointed at him. Wang! The sound of a sword suddenly rang out. Then, a flying sword suddenly flew out from the sword case on his back and slashed at Lu Feng. Lu Feng was expressionless. He pulled with both hands, and the space in front of him immediately distorted. When the flying sword entered the distorted space, it was immediately blocked, unable to move even an inch further. Seeing this scene, Yi Xian's heart skipped a beat. A true Dharma realm expert's use of the power of space was even more terrifying than he had imagined. Without thinking too much, Yi Xian pointed with his finger and the sword in front of Lu Feng was immediately sent flying back to him. Yi Xian reached out to grab the sword and abruptly stomped on the ground with his right foot. His entire body transformed into a streak of sword light and shot forward. Chi! A ray of light flashed through the battlefield. In the distance, Lu Feng's face was incomparably cold. To a true defensive magic realm expert, everyone below him was nothing more than an ant. After all, there was a qualitative difference between a true defensive magic realm expert and an ordinary one. At this moment, the Yi Xian in front of him was not even in the Dharma defensive realm, but he dared to attack him twice. To him, this was an insult. However, Lu Feng did not look down on Yi Xian because he knew that there were some people in this world that could not be looked at normally. Lu Feng gently pressed his right hand forward, causing the space in front of him to tremble violently. Following which, the space began to compress layer by layer, forming an invisible barrier in an instant. Spatial barrier. And this barrier had forcefully blocked Yi Xian's sword. Seeing that his attack had failed, Yi Xian instantly retreated over 30 meters, increasing the distance between him and Lu Feng. Lu Feng stared fixedly at Yi Xian. No matter how monstrous you are, the gap between our realms is still not. Meanwhile, his voice came to an abrupt halt because Yi Xian had already arrived before him. At the same time, a sword had already chopped down from above his head. This strike was even more terrifying than the previous ones, and the sword had already turned pitch black. Evil will sword intent. Even though he had been caught off guard by Yi Xian's attack, Lu Feng remained calm and fearless. When the sword was still a dozen or so inches away from his head, he lightly twisted his right hand. In an instant, the space above his head where the sword was turned into a spatial vortex. At the same time, the energy on Yi Xian's sword and the evil will sword intent began to break down at a frenzy. The power of spatial disintegration. But at this moment, a strange change occurred. A mysterious energy suddenly enveloped Yi Xian's sword, and this energy actually blocked the power of spatial disintegration. Lu Feng was greatly shocked when he saw this. Before he could even react, Yi Xian's sword had already slashed down. Boom! Before the eyes of the surrounding crowd, Lu Feng was directly sent flying several dozen meters away. The expressions of everyone in the surroundings became solemn when they saw this scene, especially those true Imperial Law realm experts. Because they had never imagined that Yi Xian's sword would actually be able to ignore the power of spatial disintegration. Opposite Yi Xian, Lu Feng stared fixedly at Yi Xian. How did you do it? Spatial disintegration was the most powerful technique of true Imperial Law realm experts. If spatial disintegration was ineffective against Yi Xian, then from a certain perspective, Yi Xian could already be considered as a true Imperial Law realm expert. Of course, to measure a true Imperial Law realm expert's strength, not only spatial disintegration, but also battle awareness, equipment, martial techniques, cultivation techniques, and so on. Yi Xian sneered, "How did you do it?" Lu Feng, do you know why your older brother, Supreme Lord Lu, did not come personally to capture me? Hearing this, Lu Feng frowned. What do you mean? What do I mean? Yi Xian's sneer widened, and he pointed his sword at the surroundings. If I'm not wrong, there should be other experts from the Realm Defense Alliance in the surroundings. But this Supreme Lord Lu of the Realm Defense Alliance did not come personally, right? At this point, he raised his head towards the sky, and a trace of savagery appeared on his face. Supreme Lord Lu, Realm Defense Alliance, do you really think you can dominate the firmament world? At this time, an old man appeared not far from Yi Xian. This person was the Grand Elder of the Realm Defense Alliance, Mo Xiao. In the Realm Defense Alliance, his status was second only to Supreme Lord Lu. Mo Xiao coldly glared at Yi Xian. Yi Xian, you may be relying on that mysterious master of yours, but do you really think that our Realm Defense Alliance cannot deal with your master? Deal with? Yi Xian grinned. 1,000 years ago, you couldn't do anything to my master, let alone now. 1,000 years ago. Mo Xiu's eyes narrowed. What do you mean? Yi Xian softly said, nothing much. It seems that your Realm Defense Alliance is here because you have the confidence to deal with my master. If that's the case, then follow me. As he finished speaking, he walked to Yi Ling's side, pulling Yi Ling's little hand as they walked into the distance. Mo Xiu and the others exchanged glances. A moment later, Mo Xiu commanded, follow him. Thus, in this way, Yi Xian led a group of true defensive Low Realm experts towards the mountain. Yi Xian walked very slowly, without the slightest nervousness. Along the way, he even talked and laughed with his little sister Yi Ling, as if he had someone to rely on. Behind Yi Xian, Mo Xiu and the others looked somewhat solemn. The calmer Yi Xian appeared, the more it meant that Yi Xian had nothing to fear, and it also meant that Yi Xian was not afraid of the Realm Defense Alliance at all. Behind Yi Xian, there was more than meets the eye. Mo Xiu and the others looked dignified, their hearts secretly on guard. Finally, after an unknown amount of time, Yi Xian led Mo Xiu and the others out of the wintry North Territory, and then came to a mountain. Before long, Yi Xian stopped. Not far in front of him, there was a thatched hut. Yi Xian bowed deeply towards the thatched hut, and his expression was extremely respectful. Seeing Yi Xian bow, Yi Ling hurriedly bowed as well. Seeing Yi Xian and his little sister bow, Mo Xiu and the others looked at the thatched hut. Their divine senses swept over the thatched hut, and in next to no time, everyone's expressions instantly became solemn. Because when their divine senses swept over the thatched hut, they didn't sense anything. How could this be possible? Mo Xiu's expression was extremely solemn, and his hands were trembling slightly. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly said, Master, they're here. But, that exalted Lord Lu didn't come. As he spoke, he concentrated and listened carefully. After a moment of silence, Yi Xian nodded, I understand. As soon as he finished speaking, he pulled Yi Ling's hand and walked to the front of the thatched hut, then pushed the door open and entered. When Yi Xian and Yi Ling entered the thatched hut, astonishment appeared in the eyes of Mo Xiu and the others. Because they noticed that Yi Xian and Yi Ling's auras had vanished. Lu Feng, who stood by Mo Xiu's side, said in a low voice, Elder Mo, who exactly is that person behind Yi Xian? Mo Xiu said in a low voice, a person that even exalted lords are extremely fearful of. Lu Feng's expression instantly became slightly unsightly. A person that even exalted Lord Lu is fearful of. How strong would such a person have to be able to make an expert like exalted Lord Lu feel fearful? Right at this moment, the thatched hut's door suddenly opened, and a black-robed man walked out. The black-robed man had his hands behind his back, and his entire body was enveloped by a black robe, so his face couldn't be seen at all. When the black-robed man appeared, Mo Xiu and the others were first stunned, and in the next moment, their eyes were filled with disbelief. Because the black-robed man was right in front of them, but they felt as if the black-robed man didn't exist. And when their divine sense swept past the black-robed man, it was actually empty, and they couldn't sense anything at all. However, this person just had to be standing right in front of them. Even someone as strong as exalted Lord Lu hadn't reached such a level. Mo Xiu forcefully suppressed the shock in his heart, and with great effort, he maintained a calm expression as he cupped his fists. What is your name? The black-robed man spoke in a hoarse voice, You don't have the qualifications to know this lord's name. Where is that exalted Lord Lu? Tell him to come and die. Exalted Lord Lu. Mo Xiu glanced at the black-robed man, and said in a low voice, Although your excellency is strong, my Realm Protection Alliance will not allow anyone to bully and humiliate us. Bully and humiliate? The black-robed man sneered, is this lord bullying your Realm Protection Alliance, or is it your Realm Protection Alliance bullying this lord? You've acted against my disappointing disciple time and time again. What, is it very comfortable to bully the weak? Mo Xiao was about to speak when the black-robed man suddenly flicked his sleeves, scram immediately. Go back and tell that little Lu that this lord will be going to the Realm Protection Alliance to take his dog head in a few days. Tell him to wait. Hearing this, Mo Xiao and the others' expressions became incomparably ugly. Scram? They'd come here to fight, yet they were supposed to scram just like that? But if they didn't scram, then not to mention others, even Mo Xiao himself wouldn't dare attack. Because this person was truly too unfathomable. Facing the black-robed man was like facing the vast starry sky. Even if he had a clone as a trump card, he still didn't have the slightest confidence in his heart. But it would truly be too shameful if he returned with his tail between his legs. As soon as the black-robed man finished speaking, he directly turned around and walked towards the cottage. Meanwhile, Mo Xiao gritted his teeth and said, I want to seek guidance from your excellency. Seek guidance from him. The black-robed man suddenly stopped moving. P.S. I asked around. If you go to a KTV and become a young master, then you can earn at least 1,000 a night. Brothers, don't be sad if I don't update any more one day. That proves that I, Egg, have a better future. All of you have to be happy for me, understand? Chapter 273. Let's exchange a few moves. Obviously, Mo Xiao wanted to test the black-robed man's strength. The black-robed man stood in front of the wooden hut for a while before shaking his head. You don't have the qualifications. You are only fit to fight my disciple. As he finished speaking, he walked into the wooden hut. Mo Xiao's expression was slightly ugly. At this moment, Yi Xian walked out from the wooden hut. Yi Xian walked in front of the black-robed man. If you want to challenge my master, then you have to pass me first. Mo Xiao stared at Yi Xian. You don't have the qualifications. As he finished speaking, he glanced at the wooden hut and said, if you don't want to exchange pointers with me, then please forgive me for offending you. As he spoke, he was about to attack. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly said, do you really want to know my master's background? Mo Xiao looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian shook his head and sighed, forget it. Since you want to know so much, then I will tell you. As he finished speaking, he pointed with his finger and a sword flew in front of Mo Xiao. Exquisite Spirit Sword. No, its original name should be Ling Shao. When he saw this sword, Mo Xiao was slightly stunned and didn't understand. But when he saw the two words on the sword, it was like he was struck by lightning and his mind went blank. Ling Shao. This sword was the sword of the Firmament Swordmaster. Firmament Swordmaster. Who in the Firmament world didn't know this person? That year, it was this person who suppressed the Realm Defense Alliance for almost 100 years. At this moment, Mo Xiao's heart was like a raging sea. Yi Xian didn't say anything else. He smiled coldly and then recalled his sword. He turned around and walked back into the hut. Only Yi Ling was in the hut. When she saw Yi Xian, Yi Ling blinked and smiled like a crescent moon. Yi Xian sat beside Yi Ling and held Yi Ling's hand. Just like that, the two of them waited quietly. If Mo Xiao didn't stop, then the two of them would have to fight with their lives on the line. Outside the hut, Mo Xiao's expression was extremely ugly. He didn't expect that the Firmament Swordmaster was behind Yi Xian. Firmament Swordmaster. 1,000 years ago, the Firmament Swordmaster suddenly disappeared. At that time, many people guessed that the Firmament Swordmaster had left Azure World or had fallen. Mo Xiao didn't expect that the Swordmaster hadn't fallen and had returned to world. This wasn't good. Mo Xiao directly turned around and led everyone away. Now he had to report this matter to the higher-ups. One had to know that Zhang Jia Swordhead didn't have a good relationship with the World Protecting Alliance. Especially this time, the Realm Defense Alliance was against Yi Xian, and Yi Xian was the disciple of the Firmament Swordmaster, Mo Yi Xian and Yi. And Yi Xiu. With Yi Mo with Feng and Mo. Sword with Mo was Mo. If he used it once and killed Mo Xiu and the others, another expert would come. At that time, he and his sister would be finished. Without thinking too much, Yi Xian pulled Yi Ling out of the hut and fled towards the vast mountain range. Brother, you still don't open your eyes. Is it because you haven't finished cultivating the peerless technique? There's still some time. If I succeed, will I be very powerful? Yes. I can kill High Lord Lu with one look, Wu. Although it sounds like I'm bragging, I still believe in brother. Yi Xian, after an unknown amount of time, Yi Xian suddenly stopped and turned around. Not far from his right stood a woman. The woman was wearing a green dress and a veil. At this moment, the woman was staring at him. The veiled woman slowly walked up to Yi Xian and Yi Ling. She sized up Yi Xian. True 10,000 Dharma realm. Sword sovereign. 2 sword intense. Not bad indeed. Yi Xian said, you are? The veiled woman said, Xian Gate, Mu Zhaoling. Xian Gate. Yi Xian frowned slightly. He had naturally heard of this force. Among the lower realms of the Central Divine Continent, this Xian Gate was ranked number 1. The past number 1 on the monster ranking had all come from the Xian Gate. Yi Xian collected his thoughts and asked, what's the matter? The veiled woman sized him up. I'm here to recruit people. Recruit people. Yi Xian was stunned. Then he turned to Yi Ling and said with some pride, look, your brother is so outstanding. I've just arrived at the Central Divine Continent and I've already caught the eye of the Xian Gate. Yi Ling smiled brilliantly. Big brother is amazing. Of course. Yi Xian said seriously, although I've been very low-key, there's a saying. If it's gold, it will shine. I, your brother, am. Excuse me. At this moment, Mu Zhaoling, who was not far away, suddenly said, I'm not here for you. Speaking of this, she pointed to Yi Ling, I'm here for her. Yi Ling was stunned. Yi Xian was also stunned. At this moment, time seemed to freeze. After a moment, Yi Xian laughed. After relieving himself of the embarrassment, he gently rubbed Yi Ling's little head. Your Xian Gate has a good eye. Speaking of this, he turned to look at Mu Zhaoling. Actually, I'm not bad. Won't you consider it? Mu Zhaoling shook her head. No. Yi Xian sighed softly. This is 2F** king frustrating. Mu Zhaoling glanced at Yi Xian. It's not that you're not good enough, it's that you're too good. If you didn't have a conflict with the Realm Protection Alliance, entering my Xian Gate would naturally not be a problem. Unfortunately. Yi Xian calmly said, oh, so you're afraid of the Realm Protection Alliance just like the Frigid North Sect. Mu Zhaoling sneered. What is the Frigid North Sect? How can they be compared to my Xian Gate? And my Xian Gate is not afraid of the Realm Protection Alliance. The person who wants to kill you is not Lord Lu, but someone above Lord Lu. If we accept you now, it's clear that we're not giving face to the Realm Protection Alliance. At that time, both forces will be embarrassed. My Xian Gate is not afraid of the Realm Protection Alliance, but we don't want to become enemies with them. Yi Xian lightly said, now, the person you want to accept is my sister. Mu Zhaoling shook her head. As long as we don't accept you, no matter how overbearing the Realm Protection Alliance is, they won't take the initiative to fight with my Xian Gate. Moreover, when the time comes, we will secretly train her, even the Realm Protection Alliance won't be able to find her. Speaking of this, she looked at Yi Ling. This time, I came to the Frigid North sect because I was entrusted by someone to find her. Entrusted by someone? Yi Xian was stunned, then asked, entrusted by who? Mu Xiaoling looked at Yi Xian. Senior sister An. Senior sister An. Yi Xian and his younger sister were instantly struck dumb. An Lanxiu. However, the brother and sister were still a little uncertain, so Yi Xian quickly asked, is it An Lanxiu? Mu Xiaoling nodded. Yi Xian said in a deep voice, she has already entered the Xian Gate? Mu Xiaoling nodded slightly. Yes. This time, she should have come personally, but she was delayed, so she asked me to come to the Frigid North sect to pick up your sister. Of course, if the Frigid North sect and the Realm Protection Alliance were to fight to the death, I would come forward to mediate, but I didn't expect that you would appear halfway. Yi Xian was about to speak when Yi Ling suddenly said, I am willing to enter the Xian Gate. Yi Xian looked at Yi Ling looked at Yi Xian and grinned. Brother, I know that if I continue to follow you, I will become your burden. I don't want to drag you down, I really don't want to drag you down. As she spoke, her face was already covered with tears. Yi Xian shook his head. He held Yi Ling in his arms. Silly girl, if you follow me, you will never become my burden. Yi Ling hugged Yi Xian tightly, sobbing uncontrollably. I also want to follow you, but Grandma Ling is right, I can't always rely on you, I have to learn to grow. Yi Xian was about to say something. Not far away, Mu Xiaoling suddenly said, the Realm Protection Alliance will not let you go, they will continue to attack you. Keeping her by your side is not a good thing for you and her. Looking at Yi Ling's tears, Yi Xian's heart felt like it was being cut by a knife. Brother, don't blame me. At this time, Yi Ling suddenly looked up at him. She wiped the tears on her face and revealed a smile. The Xian Gate still has Sister An. I will accompany Sister An, you don't have to worry about anything. Yi Xian grinned. Okay. He was not an indecisive person. He was very clear that letting Yi Ling join the Xian Gate was indeed a good choice. Because the matter between him and the Realm Protection Alliance was not over. If Yi Ling followed him, it would be very, very dangerous. Of course, if the Xian Gate did not have An Lanxiu, he would not let Yi Ling join the Xian Gate no matter what. Because this force was too mysterious. As if thinking of something, Yi Xian faced Mu Xiaoling. You said that little An asked you to come, do you have proof? Mu Xiaoling flicked her finger. A small wooden figure appeared in front of Yi Ling and Yi Xian. The small wooden figure and An Lanxiu looked at each other. It was the one Yi Xian had given to An Lanxiu. Seeing this small wooden figure, the last trace of doubt in Yi Xian's heart was dispelled. Yi Xian faced Yi Ling grinned. Brother, don't worry. I will take good care of myself. And, there's also Sister An. Yi Xian nodded. Then she took out a storage ring and handed it to Yi Ling. Inside the storage ring, there were 1 billion top-grade spirit stones and a snow lotus. This snow lotus was an extremely cold object. For Yi Ling, it would definitely be of great use. Yi Ling did not refuse. She accepted the storage ring and then walked in front of Mu Xiaoling. She smiled sweetly. Sister, let's go. Mu Xiaoling glanced at Yi Ling and nodded slightly. Then she pulled Yi Ling. At this moment, a cold air suddenly attacked her. Mu Xiaoling's expression did not change. Her lily-white hands trembled slightly. That cold air suddenly disappeared without a trace. At the same time, a blue circle suddenly appeared under her feet. Soon, her and Mu Xiaoling's bodies became illusory. From beginning to end, Yi Ling did not look back at Yi Xian. Not long after, Yi Ling and Mu Xiaoling disappeared in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian stood in the same place as if he had been petrified. He did not recover for a long time. In a certain space, tears kept flowing down Yi Ling's face. No matter how she wiped them, the tears would not stop flowing. Mu Xiaoling looked down at Yi Ling. Why didn't you turn around and say goodbye to him? Yi Ling wiped the tears on her face. If I turned around and saw brother. I couldn't bear to leave him. As she said that, she hugged Mu Xiaoling and cried. I couldn't bear to leave brother. I really couldn't bear to. Chapter 274. No one knew what her brother meant to Yi Ling. Everything. Her brother was her everything. She really wanted to stay by her brother's side, but she knew that if she stayed by her brother's side, with her current strength, she would definitely become her brother's burden. Only when she left would her brother not have any worries. Moreover, she could go to Xian Gate to cultivate and become stronger so that she could help her brother in the future. However, she really couldn't bear to leave. Therefore, she didn't even have the courage to look back at Yi Xian. Because she was afraid that, after seeing him, she wouldn't want to leave. Mu Xiaoling gently rubbed Yi Ling's little head. Parting is for a better reunion. Don't be sad. Cultivate well. Only when you are strong can you do what you want to do. As she said that, she turned back and looked. Actually, Yi Xian was totally qualified to join Xian Gate. Unfortunately, Yi Xian had too many troubles. If Xian Gate accepted him, they would be forcefully dragged into these troubles. Although Xian Gate wasn't afraid, they didn't want to fall out with the Realm Protection Alliance for Yi Xian. This wasn't in line with Xian Gate's interests. However, it was still a pity because Yi Xian was too monstrous. Mu Xiaoling sighed softly and then sped up. Not long later, she and Yi Ling disappeared from the scene. Realm Protection Alliance. There were only Mo Xiu and Supreme Lord Lu in the hall. The two of them didn't speak and the atmosphere was heavy. After a moment, Supreme Lord Lu suddenly said, "You have been tricked by him." Mo Xiu looked at Supreme Lord Lu. Supreme Lord Lu said calmly, "If that person is really Firmament Swordmaster, you would have died by challenging him." Mo Xiu frowned. "If it isn't Firmament Swordmaster, then who is it? You have to know that that person has no aura. Even if he is standing in front of me, I can't feel his existence." Supreme Lord Lu said coldly, "No matter who he is, since he dares to go against my Realm Protection Alliance, he isn't an ordinary person." As he said that, he looked at Mo Xiu. "Let's go. I will go with you and see who this person is." After saying that, the two of them disappeared from the hall. Not long after, High Lord Lu and Mo Xiu arrived in front of a thatched hut in a mountain range. Supremacy Lu glanced at the thatched cottage and cupped his fists. "How should I address you?" There was no movement in the thatched hut. Lord Lu narrowed his eyes. "Do you look down on me so much?" There was still no movement in the thatched hut. Lord Lu's face turned cold. With a wave of his right hand, a powerful pressure instantly swept towards the thatched cottage. Boom! The straw hut collapsed, and the inside was empty. Lord Lu and Mo Xiu were instantly stunned when they saw this scene. No one. The two of them looked at each other and Lu Xun said in a deep voice, "Let's go to the Divine Fortune-telling sect and check." Mo Xiu said in a low voice, "I might have to pay a price." High Lord Lu shook his head. "I don't care anymore. The Pine Prefecture's quintessence heart is about to emerge into the world. We absolutely can't allow that kid Yi Xian to spoil our plans during this period of time." Mo Xiu nodded, understood. The heart of origin. To the Realm Defense Alliance, this was undoubtedly the most important thing. Soon, Mo Xiu turned around and left. Lu Xun glanced at the surroundings before he left as well. After an unknown period of time, Supreme Lord Lu appeared once more, but the place was still empty. Lu Xun frowned when he saw this. Did I sense wrongly? As he spoke, he shook his head and turned around to leave. About an hour later, a figure suddenly appeared at the spot where Lu Xun Lord was originally standing. This person was Yi Xian. Yi Xian said softly, "That was close." Just now, Lu Xun had obviously noticed something. However, he wasn't sure himself. Although he didn't discover anything in the end, Yi Xian was still shocked. If he was discovered, he would definitely die. Because his intuition told him that with his current strength, even if he activated the World Prison Pagoda, he might not be able to kill Lu Xun. Lu Xun was obviously an expert above the true Imperial Law realm. In the future, he had to be more cautious when facing such an expert. After a while, Yi Xian turned around and left. He ran towards the depths of the mountain range and soon entered the vast mountains. Around half an hour later, Yi Xian found a dense forest. The forest was very dense and every tree was at least tens of feet tall. Even sunlight could not penetrate through. Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground and a small, earth, character quietly condensed between his brows. Dao Law. Condensing a Dao Law sword. He didn't know what the hell this Dao Law sword was, but he knew that since the mysterious woman had asked him to do this, she must have her reasons. Under Yi Xian's control, the Dao Law of Earth suddenly flew out from between his brows and floated in front of him. When this Dao Law appeared, the surrounding ground began to tremble. At the same time, endless power of the Earth gathered towards the Earth Law. After a while, after absorbing the endless power of the Earth Law became brighter. The Earth Law protected the Earth and endured the trampling of all things. If it was condensed into a sword, it would naturally be the Earth Sword. Gradually, Yi Xian began to sweat profusely and his body was trembling. This was because there was too much power of the Earth. It was so much that he couldn't control it. Yi Xian gritted his teeth. Condense. As soon as he said that, the Dao Law began to tremble violently. Then, under the influx of the power of the Earth, it gradually began to change shape. Around half an hour later, the tip of the sword appeared. At the sight of this, Yi Xian was ecstatic. This Dao Law could actually condense into a sword. At that moment, the Dao Law suddenly trembled violently. Boom! Endless power of the Earth shook in all directions and Yi Xian was instantly sent flying hundreds of feet away. In the surroundings, the dense forest had already been flattened. Yi Xian lay on the ground and just lay there. After an unknown period of time, he slowly got up. Blood flowed continuously from the corner of his mouth. Yi Xian wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and smiled bitterly. As expected, it's not that simple. As he said that, he sat down cross-legged and began to recuperate. Around an hour later, Yi Xian continued. Judging from the power just now, if he really succeeded in condensing Halran Gaia, it would definitely be very terrifying. At the very least, it wouldn't be any weaker than a heaven-level superior-grade sword. Moreover, with the support of the Earth, its power would definitely surpass a heaven-level superior-grade sword. He had to condense it. Yi Xian continued. However, it wasn't that smooth as he failed a few times. The most successful time was condensing the body of the sword. Unfortunately, this was far from enough. Continue. To Yi Xian, failure wasn't scary. What was scary was giving up. He wouldn't give up until the very last moment. Yi Xian condensed once again, just like that. 2 days later, Yi Xian gradually began to understand some things. He couldn't condense it by force. If he condensed it by force, the power of the Earth would instinctively resist. Not only the power of the Earth, but even the law of Earth would instinctively resist. Communicate. He communicated with the law of Earth and had it cooperate with him to condense. If the law of Earth cooperated, the power of the Earth would cooperate, at first, it wasn't easy to communicate with it because the law of earth was a bit cold and didn't pay much attention to him. In the end, Yi Xian took out the prison pagoda. Thus, the law of earth started to cooperate. Clearly, it was giving face to the prison pagoda. Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground. In front of him, the law of earth rotated violently. Countless amounts of earth power gathered towards it. Gradually, the tip of a sword appeared. Seeing this, Yi Xian was overjoyed. He continued to urge the law of earth. Soon, the body of the sword also appeared. The moment the body of the sword appeared, Yi Xian didn't relax. Instead, he became even more nervous. This was because he had failed countless times because he had condensed the sword hilt. Yi Xian was fully focused. More and more earth power gathered towards the law of earth. Gradually, the sword hilt began to appear. Half an hour later, wang! The sound of a sword suddenly rang through the sky. Success! Yi Xian lay limply on the ground. Not far away from him, a khaki-colored sword floated. The sword was 3 feet long and 2 fingers wide. It emitted a faint khaki-colored light. A moment later, Yi Xian stood up. He walked in front of the sword and grabbed its hilt. Boom! In an instant, a powerful force suddenly surged out from the sword, and the ground around him instantly cracked. The might of heaven and earth. This was the true might of heaven and earth. More accurately, it was the might of earth. When he sensed the power within the sword, Yi Xian was slightly excited. This sword was much stronger than his heaven-grade sword. As if he had thought of something, Yi Xian suddenly slashed forward with the sword. At the tip of the sword, an earth-shattering power of the earth poured out along with his sword qi. Wherever the sword qi and the power of the earth passed, the ground would crack. Moreover, the sword qi and the power of the earth had swept out for over 1,000 feet. A moment later, a huge, bottomless ravine that was over 30 meters wide appeared in front of Yi Xian. The power of one sword was so terrifying. Yi Xian was a little excited. If he added the Space Dao Law to protect the sword qi and earth power of this sword, it was very likely that this sword could hurt a true Imperial Dharma Realm expert. Simply put, he now had the ability to go head-on with a true Imperial Dharma Realm expert. The only drawback was that the Halran Gaia consumed too much energy. With his current strength, he could only activate it twice a day. If he used it too much, he would definitely be exhausted to death. Yi Xian put away his sword. The word void suddenly appeared between his brows. Space Dao Law. The power of this Space Dao Law was obviously stronger than that of the Grand Dao Law. Moreover, the Space Dao Law involved more levels. What would happen if he condensed a space sword? Space sword. Yi Xian was a little excited. He quickly sat down cross-legged. Soon, the Space Dao Law between his brows flashed out. Soon, the space around him trembled violently. Space trembled. Yi Xian was shocked. The curvature of the space trembling was a little too big. After hesitating for a moment, he decided to continue trying. Soon, as he forcefully condensed it, the surrounding space started to distort. Streaks of powerful spatial energy rippled out from the surrounding space. After an unknown period of time, the surrounding space trembled violently and a sword tip quietly condensed. P.S. Sorry, I've been updating twice recently. I sincerely apologize. Today, my dad underwent a second surgery to close the wound. I hope there won't be any problems this time. Chapter 275. The tip of the sword was transparent, like the color of water. Evidently, it was condensed from spatial power. Sensing this, Yi Xian was overjoyed. He hurriedly activated the Space Dao, hoping to condense the sword. At that moment, the the space around him suddenly shook violently. Boom! A powerful force instantly sent Yi Xian flying. He flew hundreds of meters away. Bang! Yi Xian crashed onto the ground, causing it to crack. On the ground, Yi Xian could not help but wail. Pain! It was too painful. At that moment, he felt as if all the muscles in his body were being torn apart. It was caused by spatial power, and it had a powerful tearing ability. If not for the protection of the space Tao, he would have been shattered by this spatial power. I can't condense it for now. That was what Yi Xian was thinking. This spatial power was too powerful, and he could not control it at the moment. He had to reach the magic governing realm to truly control this spatial power. At that time, he could condense the sword of space with the space Tao. Although it was a pity, Yi Xian was satisfied, as he had already condensed the Halran Gaia. With the Halran Gaia, he could now barely resist a true defensive realm expert. Without thinking too much, Yi Xian began to heal his injuries. 2 hours later, the wounds on his body had completely healed. After recovering, Yi Xian did not leave. Instead, he began to study sword kinesis flight. He, who had already reached the sword emperor level, could actually use sword kinesis flight. Back in the country of Jiang, the sword emperor who had come to cause trouble for him had used sword kinesis flight. Unfortunately, he had been killed by the mysterious woman with a single strike. Sword kinesis flight. This had been his dream from the very beginning. Sword kinesis flight between heaven and earth, and he could see thousands of mountains and rivers. Thinking of this, Yi Xian felt a little excited. Sword kinesis flight. Under Yi Xian's instructions, the Heaven's Thunder sword floated in front of him, and he leaped onto it. The sword sank slightly, but it still lifted him up. Just like that, the Heaven's Thunder sword slowly moved forward under his control. It was fine at first, but the problem was that it couldn't go fast enough. Not only could it not go fast enough, but it couldn't go too high either. Otherwise, the sword would become extremely unstable. Just like that, Yi Xian pondered for nearly an entire day, but his sword still couldn't move fast enough. Not only could it not move fast, the sword could only reach 2 zhang above the ground. Any higher and it wouldn't be able to withstand it. At this moment, Yi Xian realized that the imperial sword technique wasn't that simple. Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground, deep in thought. If the mysterious woman was still here, then all the problems he encountered could be solved, but now, the mysterious woman was not here. I can't build a car behind closed doors. He was not a peerless genius, and it was impossible for him to understand everything for no reason. He had to learn. Learn. Pale Sword Sect. Yi Xian thought of this sect, the biggest sect in the Azure world. His current understanding and learning of the Sword Tao all came from the mysterious woman. There was no need to doubt the mysterious woman's strength, but now that she was not here, it meant that he could not obtain new knowledge of the Sword Tao. At this time, if he built a car behind closed doors and blindly pondered, it might produce the opposite of the desired result. It was better to learn from the strengths of others and see more outstanding swordsmen. To the Pale Sword Sect. After Yi Xian made up his mind, he immediately set off. The Pale Sword Sect was a famous faction in the Azure world, so Yi Xian easily found the specific location of the Pale Sword Sect. The Pale Sword Sect was located on a sword mountain in the southern part of the Divine Central Continent. The reason it was called Sword Mountain was because the mountain was like a sharp sword hanging upside down in the air, piercing the heavens. Rumor had it that this Sword Mountain, which was thousands of zhang tall, had been forcibly carved out by the Azure World Swordmaster. 2 days later, Yi Xian arrived at Sword Mountain. At this time, he had slightly disguised his appearance. He had made a blood-red birthmark the size of a palm on his face, making him look extremely ugly. In addition, he had also used chaotic energy to conceal his Sword Emperor and true 10,000 Dharma realm aura. The current him was a Swordmaster, and a divine unity realm cultivator. But there was no other way. If he did not disguise himself, the Realm Protection Alliance would be able to find him in a matter of minutes. One had to know that in order to capture him, the Realm Protection Alliance had released his portrait throughout the entire Azure world. At the foot of Sword Mountain, Yi Xian raised his head to look at the peak. Above him was the Pale Sword Sect. Before he came, he had done some research. The Pale Sword Sect would recruit outer disciples every year, but now was not the time to do so. Apart from this, there was another way to enter the Pale Sword Sect, and that was to recommend oneself and pass the trials. The Pale Sword Sect had 3 trials at the foot of the mountain. As long as one passed these 3 trials, he would be able to enter the Pale Sword Sect. Yi Xian came to the first trial. There was an old man lying there. The old man had his legs crossed and his eyes were slightly closed. There was a lecherous smile on his face. It was obvious that he was dreaming of something. Yi Xian cupped his fists towards the old man. "Senior, I want to pass the trials." No response. Yi Xian said again, "Senior, I want to pass the trials." This time, his voice was louder. Still no response. Yi Xian frowned. He suddenly stepped forward and grabbed the old man, shouting angrily, "I want to pass the trials." The old man opened his eyes. He was a little stunned. A moment later, he shouted angrily, "Who are you?" Yi Xian let go of the old man and said calmly, "An Yi, I am here to pass the trials." The old man said angrily, "Pass what trials?" "The old man declares that you fail. Hurry up and scram." Yi Xian was expressionless. "Old man, it's not that I'm boasting, but not taking me in is the greatest loss your Pale Sword Sect has suffered in the past 1,000 years. The old man said angrily, "Stop bullshitting. With someone like you, you still think it's 1,000 years of loss? According to the old man, if I take you in, I'm afraid you will become the scourge of my Pale Sword Sect for 1,000 years. Yi Xian took out a true great sword. He pointed it at the old man. "Old man, fight me one-on-one." One-on-one. The old man was stunned. He wanted to fight him one-on-one. The old man sized up Yi Xian. "Is there something wrong with your head?" Yi Xian was expressionless. "I'll give you 3 strikes. Quick, draw your sword." The old man glanced coldly at Yi Xian. "Young man, you really don't know the immensity of the heavens and the earth. Never mind, let this old man teach you how to be a person." As he spoke, he waved his right hand, and an expanse of sword light shot out violently. The myriad Dharma realm. Moreover, it was a Swordmaster. Meanwhile, Yi Xian charged forward swiftly with his sword in hand, and then he slashed down. Hiss! The expanse of sword light was directly torn apart. The old man was stunned, and then he said with astonishment, "Swordmaster? You're actually a Swordmaster?" Yi Xian put his sword away and said indifferently, "I'm the real deal." The old man's expression instantly became slightly unsightly when he heard this. Swordmaster. Even if such a young Swordmaster was placed in the Pale Sword Sect, he could be considered as a top-rate disciple. He really was a genius. The old man went silent for a moment before he said, "Wait a moment." As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left. On the spot, Yi Xian put his sword away and closed his eyes in meditation. Arrogant? He was naturally being arrogant intentionally. Because according to normal circumstances, he had to first become an outer court disciple, then an inner court disciple, and finally an elite disciple. And only an elite disciple could come into contact with the core of the Pale Sword Sect. This was truly too slow, and he didn't have that much time. He had to be more high-profile and directly draw the attention of the Pale Sword Sect's higher-ups. In next to no time, the old man and a middle-aged man arrived before him. The middle-aged man sized up Yi Xian. "What's your name?" Yi Xian said, "An Yi." The middle-aged man nodded lightly. "Where are you from?" Yi Xian said in a low voice, "An independent cultivator." The middle-aged man asked, "Why do you want to join the Pale Sword sect?" Yi Xian's expression was calm. "After attaining the Swordmaster realm, it's truly difficult to break through once more by just relying on myself. So I want to join the Pale Sword sect, and I hope to learn new things in the Blue Sword sect so that I can break through once more in the Sword Dao." The middle-aged man looked at Yi Xian for a long time before he said, "You can become an inner court disciple." Inner court disciple? Yi Xian shook his head. "I want to become an elite disciple." The middle-aged man smiled. "Why?" Yi Xian said, "Becoming an elite disciple allows one to learn more and obtain more resources." The middle-aged man shook his head lightly. "Your way of thinking is correct. However, if you want to become an elite disciple, then it depends on if any of the martial uncles are willing to accept you. If they aren't willing, then you can only become an inner court disciple. Understand?" Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, and then he said, "I'm so outstanding, so they ought to accept me, right?" The middle-aged man laughed heartily. "Your skin is really thick." Yi Xian said seriously, "I'm an honest person, and I like to speak the truth." The middle-aged man shook his head. "Come with me. Since you're already a sword master, then you're qualified to see the martial uncles." Finished speaking, he turned and left. Yi Xian was about to follow, but as if he thought of something, he suddenly flicked his finger, and a spatial ring fell in front of the old man. "Just now, I've offended you." Finished speaking, he hurriedly followed the middle-aged man. Behind him, the old man glanced at the spatial ring and was instantly stunned. Inside the spatial ring, there were actually millions of top-grade spirit stones. Millions of top-grade spirit stones. To him, this was undoubtedly not a small amount of wealth. A moment later, the old man put away the spatial ring, and said with a smile, "Interesting little fellow." Under the middle-aged man's lead, Yi Xian arrived at the top of the mountain. There was only a single palace at the top of the mountain, and he didn't see anyone along the way, not even a single Pale Sword sect disciple. As if he knew what Yi Xian was thinking, the middle-aged man suddenly smiled. "They're all cultivating in the Mausoleum of Swords, so it's very rare to see them." Yi Xian nodded, and then he asked, "How many swordsmen are there in the Pale Sword sect?" The middle-aged man smiled. "About 150, but there are 6 sword immortals, 26 sword emperors, 62 sword masters, and the rest are at least great swordsmen. Of course, only some who have just joined aren't. However, anyone who's able to join the Pale Sword sect has great talent and potential, so becoming a great swordsman and sword master is only a matter of time." Yi Xian's scalp went numb when he heard that. 6 sword immortals, 26 sword emperors, 62 sword masters. What a fucking terrifying lineup. As expected of one of the top powers in the Central Divine Continent. The Realm Defense Alliance. At that moment, Yi Xian suddenly thought of the Realm Defense Alliance. If the Pale Sword sect was this terrifying, then just how terrifying was the Realm Defense Alliance's true strength? At that moment, the two of them entered the main hall. The main hall was empty. On each side of the main hall, there were 3 empty chairs. The middle-aged man bowed slightly to the center of the main hall. "Martial uncles, please come out and meet me. There's a young man who wants to become a true disciple." After a moment of silence, an old man with white hair and a beard suddenly appeared on the first seat on the left. The old man sized up Yi Xian, then shook his head. "Too bad." After saying that, he immediately disappeared. Yi Xian. At that moment, a white-robed middle-aged man suddenly appeared on the first seat on the right. The middle-aged man glanced at Yi Xian, then disappeared without saying a word. Just like that, after a while, only the last seat on the left remained empty, and the people who had appeared before all shook their heads. to put it simply, they didn't like him. Yi Xian's face was as gloomy as water. He had underestimated the Pale Sword sect. The Pale Sword sect didn't like ordinary sword masters at all. Moreover, they were only at the Divine Unity realm. The problem was that he couldn't return to the Myriad Dharma realm or Sword Emperor, because if he did that, it would definitely arouse suspicion. At that moment, a woman suddenly appeared on the last seat. The woman glanced at Yi Xian, her face expressionless. A bit too bad, but barely. My Cloudsword Mountain just so happens to be lacking an errand boy. Come with me. Errand boy. Yi Xian. You're tuning into the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.